Welcome to the meeting of the Durham Town Council for Monday, October 7th, 2024. We are in the Durham Town Hall, Council Chambers. I call this meeting to order, and let's start with a roll call of members. And actually, I don't know whether Em will be on Zoom or not. If she is, then we need to do the okay.
She's not at the moment.
She's not at the moment. Okay, so we will go ahead. So go ahead and introduce yourselves. You can start here.
Heather Grant.
James Bubar.
Todd Selig.
Sally Needell.
Joe Friedman.
Wayne Burton.
Eric Lund.
Darrell Ford.
Curtis Register.
Okay, thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. I would like to recommend that we move item 14, new business, ahead of item 12, minutes, and item 13, roundtable, in order to have the presentation that Rich Rain is doing followed by the new business, since the two are related. So we would put minutes and roundtable at the. All those in favor, raise of hands. All those opposed? Unanimous? Okay, we make that change. Special announcements. So it is a tradition in Durham in October for us to read our Durham, New Hampshire Land, Water, and Life Acknowledgement, which honors the indigenous people of Durham. The town of Durham, New Hampshire wishes to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection maintained by the Pennacook, Abenaki, and Wabanaki peoples of Ndakina, homeland, Aki, land, Nibi, water, Lolakwakak, flora, and Awaasak, fauna. New Hampshire has been home to these indigenous people for thousands of years. The residents of Durham acknowledge the ongoing hardships endured by our indigenous neighbors after the loss of their unceded homelands, which we now steward, and we will work to foster relationships to support the well-being of indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors. Make sure you let us know your name and where you're from.
William Hall, Durham. We've got three things I want to talk about tonight. The first one is about the resolution that you people wrote and signed. This is an editorial written by Chuck Douglas, the head of, I forgot what you call him, of the State Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. This is what is circulating around Concord, and this is what they're making their decisions on when they come to agreements with the university. So I handed out the newspaper article about the what the university did and why they were doing it from last fall. If you draw a straight line for this, and I'm going to give this to Todd so he'll fix it so you can all get a copy, from this to that agreement, you'll find out that the university has high-paid six-cylinder figures to vice presidents that are in charge of making people feel happy on campus. The demonstrations on the T Hall lawn were considered to be anti-Semitic. As you know, 3 university presidents have been fired, UPenn, Columbia, and Harvard, and I'm surprised the MIT president has lasted this long. The people in Concord have to get the university budget, and they were getting pushback from the legislature, and so they made it very, 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 very clear to the university president, dean, that there weren't going to be any problems over that with that demonstration, and which meant it's not going to, they don't want it dragging on to graduation or anything else. We kind of stepped in the middle of that with our resolution, and we had no right to do that. When you go off that Main Street and step on that curb, that's state property. We don't have any more right to tell them how to manage state property than Concord does to tell the state how to run things on state property, like the psychiatric ward, the prison, the youth detention center, and whatnot. It isn't any of Concord's business. What goes on the campus, we can have opinions about it, and we can express it and put it in writing, but we better be damn careful what we do it, and it's not counterproductive. So I did this on the 1-year anniversary of the invasion of 3,000 people from Gaza that murdered 1,200 people in Israel and captured 250 more. and it's been an awful mess. And I want to tell you that your letter that you sent or your resolution should never have been done, because not that the one in Durham's going to make that much difference, but other places have done it too, and all that just encourages this thing to drag out and kill more Palestinians or Syrians. So you do what you want, but what is said in this opinion is where the state's coming from, and I think we would be very smart to pay attention to it. Veterans credit, and this is a good example of what happens at the council. We had a discussion at a meeting recently about the veterans credit, and several people had some things to say. People that had never been in the service and don't know what the UCMJ is. When you go to the service, in the service, you do what they tell you to, when they do it, where to do it, and you can't leave. Any number of issues. And that's what Wayne Burton said at the meeting very well and convinced you people. But it's an example of people that do not have the experience, do not have the knowledge, and don't have the brains to compensate for not having the experience and knowledge by they just don't have the ability to be realistic about what it's like to be a service person. And you were talking about, well, I think Cardin Welch was given credit for talking about what the person did in the service, how long it was. I will tell you that, Mr. Ford, that I was drafted in 1964 and spent 2 years doing exactly what the Army told me to do. And you can't second guess my job there anymore, and you can second guess someone else's, whether I went to Vietnam. I didn't. But I want to tell you I was working 12-hour days regularly after they took about half our company to Vietnam. And I had been to an extra school, so I didn't have enough time to go. So it's important that in that case you listen to what Curtis Register says. He wasn't here that night, but Wayne hit it right on. And I tried to get up and say this at the meeting, but of course Sally didn't. He didn't want to hear from someone. I have an opinion of this council with regard to veterans. The only thing I don't make a big deal of it. I don't expect to be lied about either.
Yes.
Point of order, M. Friedrichs has joined the meeting on Zoom, and perhaps the council could act to allow her to participate
Yes.
remotely.
So I wonder if we can just do that by a raise of hands? Or maybe a roll call with
Should
the
be
yes.
roll call, yeah.
So Councilor Friedrichs is now on Zoom, supportive of having her participate remotely. Give your name and say yay or nay. Yes or
Heather
no?
Grant, yes.
James Bubar, yes.
Sally Nadell, yes.
Joe Friedman, yes.
Wayne Burton, yes. Eric Lund, yes.
Darrell Ford, yes.
Curtis Register, yes.
Thank you. Please, more public comments.
Thank you. Joshua Meyerowitz, 7 Chesley Drive. A year ago today, Vivian Silver, a Canadian-Israeli exactly my age, gave her last radio interview. She spoke from her safe room at Kibbutz Be'eri. She told the global day of mourning for Vivian and the other civilians and security forces killed, wounded, and taken hostage on October 7th. It's also a day of mourning for the tens of thousands of confirmed dead and wounded Palestinians, mostly women and children, in Israel's response. 6 months after you at the Durham Town Council passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire, the bipartisan U.S.-funded killing and massive destruction have escalated. They have now spread to the occupied West Bank, Lebanon, Yemen, and even Iran. Peace activist Vivian Silver's legacy illuminates the role of propagandistic partial truths and misrepresentations on the national and global level, as well as locally at UNH. Vivian's son, Yonatan Zagin, who as a child had gone many times with his mother to Gaza, has now rededicated himself to carrying on his mother's activism. He is partnered with a 30-year-old Palestinian, Arab Aramean, whose little sister, Abir, was shot and killed by an Israeli soldier in 2007 as she stood in front of her school. She was 10 years old. Aramin wanted vengeance, but his father, who himself had spent 7 years in Israeli jail for his resistance efforts, told his son that vengeance was weakness and that peace was the only solution. The father took his son on a tour of the Nazi concentration camp at Buchenwald and really threw off the brain of his son. He said at a recent seminar, "So I taught myself Hebrew, and I began to learn that if you want to kill yourself, keep hating your enemy. If you want to save yourself, then learn about your enemy." Aramin and Zeigen are among other such peace activist pairs, and the Israeli government tries to stop such groups from speaking in Israeli schools because they say it violates a rule against slandering Israeli soldiers. There's also a lot of self-censorship in Israeli and even U.S. media. The stories we are told are usually that violence committed by us and our allies is always a response to the violence of an evil enemy. Facts that don't fit that narrative are suppressed. Very few Americans seem to know about the 2018 Israel in a symbolic attempt to return to the Gaza envelope communities, which are mostly built on the ruins of Arab villages. An independent UN Commission of Inquiry, lots of details online, found that Israeli snipers shot at journalists, health workers, children, and persons with disabilities, killing hundreds and maiming tens of thousands. Israeli peace activists also know that Lebanon's Hezbollah, now being bombed along with a lot of people who are around them, arose as a response to Israel's 1982 invasion, an 18-year occupation of southern Lebanon. But that does not fit the dominant story of their attack, and we respond. Yesterday's newspaper, Seacoast forces head out to counter Iran. In the mainstream media, Iran started the fight with us when taking over the embassy in 1979. Actually, what all peace activists know is that the fight started when the U.S. and Britain overthrew an elected government in Iran 26 years earlier, and to try to control Iranian oil. And Israel got involved in supporting the brutal Shah of Iran as well, arming the brutal Savak police with tens of thousands of Uzi submachine guns. The U.S. and Britain then are responsible for the horrific dictatorship of the Shah, and thus also for the current Iranian government that grew from predictable Iranian resistance. The same patterns and distortions, as I've outlined for you 3 times, are at UNH, where UNH officials are still peddling false information to the UNH community, the news media, and even to the courts. Those UNH entities who should be investigated have just been allowed to investigate themselves, and you can guess what the conclusion of that was. They did not do anything wrong on May 1st, and they have not lied about what they did. Subsequently, more needs to be done. So will you please pay focused on your critically important resolution on August 12th, protecting, constitutionally protected, nothing to do with towns or states, freedom of speech and the right not to get beaten up or threatened with violence for speaking about those things. So at this time of year, we usually say happy.
Anyone else like to make a public comment this evening? Anyone on Zoom? Doesn't look like it. Nobody on Zoom? No. Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the next item. Abigail Bagley is with us tonight to share the report from the UNH Student Senate External Affairs.
Good evening, everybody. How are we?
Fine.
It's good to see everybody. A couple of big things have happened pretty recently. We had a very successful weekend of music. The block party that was discussed at the previous town meeting went off without a hitch. I heard from we were able to have a good compromise with the town on how to make that a great event, as well as Flo Rida, also a big hit on campus this weekend. I was unable to go to the concert because midterms week is this week, but I was told it was a lot of fun and it was very successful. So thank you to the EMS, firefighters, police officers from surrounding towns and from Durham that were able to assist in any way for the safety of our students. We always appreciate that. President Chilton very kindly spoke to Student Senate a week ago, and she was very gracious in giving us her time and to talking about how to work with the legislature on a new budget that will be put forth and how to make the UNH a better place for the community of Durham as well as its student body. And so it was great to hear from her and talk to her a little bit more one-on-one in a more intimate setting to be able to hear what goals she has for the university. So that was always great. Obviously, there was a T Hall protest today regarding the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th incident in Israel, and I assume it still happened. With the rain, I'm not exactly sure. Yeah. We don't know if it happened, but if it did, I really hope that it went successfully and all students were safe, as well as any other participants. Commencement ceremony. So after I left town meeting a couple weeks ago, we got an email a couple of days later regarding commencement ceremony for seniors this year and probably the future of up in hours. The first one being at 9:30 I believe, then 12:30, then 4 o'clock. This will obviously be a great burden to the town and the residents, as there will be hundreds and hundreds of parents and family members and friends that will be in town that day. Great for small businesses, for lunch purposes, and for varying things, but it will be extremely busy. Main Street will be extremely busy. This is due to the construction that will be happening at the Whittemore Center starting this year with the endowment, and that obviously is a multi-year plan. So we expect commencement ceremony to be addressed accordingly, and any further events that happen in the Whittemore Center will be changed, obviously. But seniors, especially myself, we're not super happy about the situation. We're given limited tickets, so we are trying to work actively with the Alumni Association and the university to try and see how we can make this a better situation for all parties for years forward. But this year in particular, all commencement ceremonies will be on the same day in the Whittemore Center, which will be a little bit of a disruption, maybe a good one, maybe a bad one for
on what's going on with the university and stuff. Just a point of edification. It's always good practice. If you don't know something, don't brief it. So
Oh, okay.
If you have, you don't know about the protests, don't give people false expectations or misinformation. Good to go?
Okay. I just knew it was happening today,
Understood.
and I was in class during
Good to go.
the actual time, so.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Anything else?
Counselor Burton?
I never minded graduation day. In fact, the town celebrates too, you know. We've given rise to these students, and I used to wave to the buses going by and give them a big thumbs up, and for a day, I think we can give them their time, and so they can enjoy the day, and the rest of us, for one day, I think can deal with.
We appreciate that. In the past, obviously, post-COVID, it was varied over the weekend, so it was probably less of a burden to the town in regards to parking and all of the other fiascos that happened, so.
Yeah, but my recollection is that pre-pandemic, the commencement was a single ceremony for all persons getting degrees from the university. So they're moving back in the direction of how it was before.
Yeah. So there's some student concern, obviously, with limited ticketing. We only get 4 tickets, so if you have a larger family or an unconventional family, that's not ideal. So we're trying to work it out to see what happens, but I just wanted to let you guys know that there is going to be only one day of ceremonies this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, so we're a few weeks into the new academic year, and like, how's it going from the perspective of students? That's one question. And the second is with micro-mobility devices like the scooters and skateboards. There's a lot of concern at the start of the year about sort of observations of anything goes behavior. But my observation is that the behavior has improved by students, that they're more frequently going with traffic at, anyway. So I just, do you have any updates on that and how students are sort of internalizing the messaging that's been going out?
Yeah, of course. So I feel like we've witnessed a lot more diligency, I think is the correct word to put it, of students getting pulled over on these scooters or e-devices if they're, not following town ordinances or the way the SRRR is, our student handbook regarding scooters and making sure that they're registered. And so the beginning of the school year was very, very diligent on, making sure everyone had the particular permitting they needed. And I would be walking on campus and I'd see someone pulled over in a scooter and just be like, oh, that's a weird sight, they're getting a ticket. But it completely makes sense if they're not following the town ordinances or what the university wants. So it's been great. We've had a lot of increase in really great behavior. There's always going to be a couple of people that, don't necessarily love what's going on regarding that. But just in general, the student body, we just had it's week 7 in the academic semester, so midterm week. So everyone's a little stressed, everyone's getting a little sick. It's that part of the semester where, everyone's just like, oh, when's Thanksgiving happening? But in general, we had a great morale booster with the Flo Rida concert last night, and everyone's really excited for this academic year, and I'm very excited. It's my senior year, so I'm enjoying myself a lot. So it's been great so far.
Okay.
All set?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
I just wanted to
Oh, I'm
ask
sorry.
one thing about graduation. Will UNH be doing a lottery at all for extra tickets? So people who do have larger families or blended families can submit for potential additional tickets through a lottery system.
So those updates are going to be through our Alumni Association, and currently we have no update regarding that. The Alumni Association and Student Senate in particular, we've been trying to work on a better relationship just in general and trying to figure out what ways we can help them out as well as they can meet us halfway as well. So there's a couple of different things, including senior week, that we're trying to work out with them. So hopefully that's an update I can give you guys soon, but right now there is no lottery system that students can have access to yet. Maybe hopefully in the spring we can have a little bit more clarity on that, but right now it's just the 4 tickets and that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next item is our unanimous consent agenda. We have a number of motions there. Would anyone like to pull any of those motions? Yes.
G and H, please.
G and H?
G and H.
Okay.
Sorry, which ones?
G and-
8G and 8H. 8G?
G and H, the last
G
two.
and H, okay, thank you.
Okay. I will go ahead and read. Yes?
E?
You would like to E?
E?
E, okay.
I'm going to say D as well, the parking kiosk.
D? All right, it's getting shorter.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear, was that B or D?
You got Delta, Echo, Golf, and Hotel.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, absolutely not what you just said to me.
Nobody wants to talk about F?
That was too long.
I mean, we can go for a straight here.
All right, so we still have F, huh? All right. I'll try not to leave that any out. I'm sure you will remind me if I have. Okay.
Did somebody say B?
I move the Durham Town Council does hereby adopt Resolution 2020 received by the town of Durham between January 1 and December 31, 2023.
I second.
Well, we're going to go through the whole list.
Oh, you're going to go through them
Yeah,
all, sorry.
Well, I'll go through the minutes.
I got
Not the whole
excited.
list, but the amended list. You got excited, okay. The Durham Town Council, I move the Durham Town Council does hereby, upon recommendation of the administrator, approve a special event permit application submitted by Rachel Gazowski, Parks and Rec Director, to close certain sections of town roads for the annual Frost Fest to be held on Saturday, December 7th, 2024, from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., with a rain date of Sunday, December 8th, 2024, from 5 to 7 p.m. I move that Durham Town Council does hereby, upon recommendation of the administrator, approve a special event permit application submitted by Rachel Gazowski, Parks and Rec Director, to close certain sections of town roads for the downtown trick-or-treat event to be held on Saturday, October 26, 2024, from 2 to 4 p.m., with a rain date of Sunday, October 27, 2024, from 2 to 4 p.m. And I move the Durham Town Council hereby approves the signing of the warrant for the general election to be held on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. All right. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Councilor Register. And we will do a roll call vote for,
Curtis Register, aye.
all right.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Sine Adele, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
All right, the meeting of unanimous
I'm
consent.
Friedrichs, aye.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
thank you. Sorry, I have a bad habit of not looking up, so. All right, so we can start with a look at 8D. The Durham Town Council does hereby, upon recommendation of the administrator, approve the spending of $117,130 for the purpose of purchasing 14 Flowbird parking kiosks to replace those on Madbury Road and in downtown, and in the downtown core. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Oh, go ahead.
Councilor Grant, I'll give you the credit for that one.
Just lost it.
All right, so this
know.
this was pulled, so there must be a discussion. Anyone want to bring up a discussion of this?
I think Councilor Friedrichs asked for this to be pulled.
Yes, okay.
I just wanted to ask for a little more information on the kind of lifespan of the kiosks that are there. Would they not last through this next year, or what is the timeline? Why is it important to be replacing them this year as opposed to waiting till next year?
Happy to answer that. So the lifespan is between 10 and 12 years. We have 27 of the kiosks. Last year we replaced 13. So the 14 that are slated to be replaced this year, that's the second half of that project. We purposely held off throughout the year because of the construction that was going on downtown. We knew that Public Works was going to be busy, they wouldn't have time to install them, and so purposely we waited until now to order them. But the lifespan is 10 years, 10 to 12 years, and that's the age of the kiosks that we're replacing right now.
Will having all of the kiosks on one system, will that provide any cost savings or significant work kind of reduction for personnel?
Yeah, it does. It really streamlines it for our administrative assistants who do the parking program as well. And there are lesser credit card fees, so there is a net savings to going with the new Flowbird.
Anyone else have any questions regarding this motion? Oh, go ahead.
Well, the current meters are really showing a lot of wear and tear, and we're experiencing operational challenges with them. So, for example, the tape that provides the visual tickets to put on your windshield, when the tape runs out completely, that causes the machine to send a signal to let the PD know it needs to be replaced. But more and more what's happening is the tape is getting stuck because the gears aren't working properly. And because the tape is not empty, it doesn't send an error message to the police. So users are then inconvenienced with trying to enter the information without a ticket coming out. And that's creating some challenges. But there's rust that's taking place, and just reliability is becoming problematic. And currently, every time somebody takes advantage of a free ticket, the town actually is charged by the current provider for that transaction. And the new system will stop that charge, that we won't incur that charge. So there'll be a savings there. And there are some other efficiencies with the new models as well.
I suppose on a selfish note, I won't have to go back to the car with a ticket. There is, you just sort of lock your car, walk away, find the machine, enter your tag number, and go do your business. And there will be no change to the additional free hour for residents. Everything else will work the same, you just don't have a ticket.
Yes.
I have a question. Just curious. Looks like these.
They do the meter program. The goal is compliance of the meter program and,
Right.
and ensuring turnover and stopping sort of abusive practices by users. But the meters do generate a net profit to the town of Durham. They cover their costs, they cover the cost of the parking staff and program, and they generate net revenue to the town. So it's a financial benefit to Durham. Well, as Rainey noted, ideally we would have moved forward with all of it last year, but we had concerns about capability of doing so, so we staged it. I think I'm going to look to Chief Kelly, but I believe the challenges will be continued breakdowns in the machines, additional need for our limited staff to service the machines to make sure they're working properly. And in addition, the programming is much easier with the new machines. They're all sort of digital. There are fewer parts to malfunction, and so our analysis was it made sense operationally and fiscally to make the change out. My bet is that 10 years from now, when it's time to look at replacing the machines again, we may in fact move out of the machine business and have a completely sort of automated system. And that's what UNH is actually starting to move to on campus. As their machines break, they're not actually replacing them, and they're relying slowly on app-based technology. But our concern for Durham is that our clientele is less tech sophisticated than.
So the second part, oh, go for it, Chief, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, in addition to that, the prices will most definitely increase. We got the prices we figured out last year in 2023 with the company. So they're giving us these kiosks for 2023 prices. So if we were to delay it another year, I am very certain that the cost of the kiosk itself would go up.
Roger that, Chief. The only thing I just want to throw out there, I'm not necessarily for or against. I will take the recommendation. However, I think it is important to say that I think members of this council, to include myself, have proposed a lot of big-brained and expensive ideas in this current year that may significantly impact the tax rate. And I don't know if $100,000 is too big or too small of a savings or a cost to overload our current capabilities with the budget in regards to what the next tax rate will be. But if we think it's the trouble that it is causing our law enforcement, our citizens, and our public works folks, and the increase in rates for the kiosks, I just want to raise that concern.
I guess my response is that we run the parking fund as a fund, and so we're trying to take into consideration the cost of the vehicles, the staffing, the supplies, including the kiosks that allow the system to operate. So we've planned and budgeted around this change out of aging equipment, and it will affect the parking fund, but it's not going to hit the tax rate because it's all within the parking fund.
Thank you for answering that question.
Okay. Like the rink, we operate that too, kind of as its own little fund.
Thank you.
So, okay.
Appreciate your time, Chief.
You're welcome.
You should be anticipating a reduction in the operating costs
Right.
once these are fully deployed.
That's correct, which would then
That would cut
potentially generate
2025.
more dollars for the general fund to the extent we are able to operate with expenses less than revenues, which we anticipate only intensifying.
Right.
Thank you. We need to vote. So we have a second, correct, from,
I second, if it has not been seconded.
If it hasn't, it is now.
it is now. All right.
First,
So let's do a roll call vote. We'll start with
Curtis
Councilor
Register, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Well, excuse me, Eric. Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Sally Nadell, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Heather Grant, aye.
Emp Friedrichs, aye.
8E, actually is not really a motion, it's more of an acknowledgement of the town receiving Town Administrator Selig's September 30, 2024 progress report. Yes.
Well, I pulled it because I got ahead of myself when reading his email to Counselor Bubar that this project on the west end would probably be a significant, what do they call it, Todd?
Impact of regional significance?
Impact of regional, project regional significance. It has its laws, and the university is exempt from our laws, and so planning is a little bit disjointed. And I thought it would be really good if an economic impact study were done on the scope of this project, which is huge, because that could guide us in how we strategize about how to do it. And so, but it turns out that and Jen Sis is here, who would get this would end up on her desk if it happens, because the Regional Planning Commission would receive it if the planning board decides, I guess the planning board gets the call, and whether it's called a regional.
Well, I think the planning board would discuss it and then refer it over to the Regional Planning Commission to evaluate, to determine if in fact it is a project of regional.
Well, by the look on Jen's face when I mentioned this to her, which was complete surprise, I thought, and since I'm on the planning commission, I would think this would be a really good thing to have happen, because a regional impact study like this, it's going to affect more than Durham, certainly, with the size and scope of the project. And so I just alert people on the council and Jen that this is coming at us, because the plans, the PUD plan now is about to come forward, right, Todd, I think? And that should
Yes.
give us a clue as to what the challenges will be.
Right.
And I'm glad Jen is here tonight, because this, and when I hope she answers the question, do you have the resources to conduct such a regional impact study, and what the time frame would be, so that would in fact inform us of, inform the project and how we go about doing it. And that's why I pulled this off, just to alert the town council and the Stratford Regional Planning Commission that this may end up in their bailiwick too.
Just a comment.
Yes.
I agreed actually that it should be pulled, and it was going to be my suggestion, because I think we should spend time on another meeting scheduled in the future to actually go through it, rather than just have it on the unanimous consent. So we can kind of go.
Thank you. I'll move approval. Or you don't need approval, do you? This is for our
Honestly,
information.
it wasn't a motion, it was really just a statement. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
very
you.
good. No, that's fine. So I think the next is 8G. I move that Durham Town Council does hereby adopt Resolution 2024-21. And we'll see whether we amend or keep it as it is when we finish the discussion. Committing future revenue from the municipal transportation improvement fee for net zero transportation initiatives. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Lund. So now I open up the discussion. This has come to us from Councilor Friedrich, so I'm glad that she's on Zoom. And
Sure. I asked that it be pulled for a number of reasons. As I go through the council communication, to me, there are a number of issues with it. Even from the beginning, that it was initiated by the town council. This was not initiated by the town council. This was initiated, Friedrichs presented it, but it wasn't initiated by the town council. In the description, there's a number of terms, excuse me, in the description, there's a number of terms that are used that I've never really seen defined, and it doesn't seem to be any backup or sources for that, and specifically, net zero transportation. I don't know if everybody understands what net zero transportation is. I don't understand what it is, and I kind of follow these things. And I'd appreciate some sort of definition of what net zero is if we're going to put all our money towards it. Do we actually know what it is?
It's a reference to carbon emissions.
How are you going to measure it? So that you know you achieve it.
I'd appreciate knowing things like that and where that comes from. If I could just kind of maybe lay out the number of items that I have and then maybe a response, or unless you want to do this one at a time. Yes, so there's also restricting it to just what they're calling net zero is, well, once we get a definition, I guess we'll know whether it makes sense to restrict it to that, but it seems that if it's money for a transportation fund, does it include money for buses? Is buses net zero? Is it part of public transportation? If we have a shuttle? It's suggested that greenhouse gases are generating, a town's goal to, well, it's stated that the town's greenhouse gases are significantly generated by transportation, 43.5%. And I have no idea where that number is coming from. What's the source of that number? How can you be down to the 1/10% in greenhouse gases?
I believe it's from our climate action plan. That's where the data
Yes.
was, right.
And has that climate, and where did they get that information of the, 0.5% and further, and later there's a 0.8%, a very specific number on a very big item that what is being measured, and I don't think this council has been shown those numbers or where they came from.
We did get some.
It's hyperlinked in the resolution, the references.
The references are there, but the sources aren't there of where those numbers came from.
Well, so when the climate action plan was based in part on the greenhouse gas inventory that we undertook with the assistance of several UNH Sustainability Fellows. And the UNH Sustainability Institute worked with those fellows to help develop modeling on emissions. And that allowed us to create calculations around transportation, the built environment, and other sources of emissions in Durham, whether they were municipal, school, UNH-focused, or private sector. And so we have all of that data. We do acknowledge a lot of this is based upon estimation and sort of national trends. So, but based on the modeling we use, the percentages are what the percentages are. And a huge portion of the emissions come from the transportation and built environment sectors. Transportation is influenced in large part by regional transportation, which is essentially the best data we have for Durham. So it's not only Durham people, it's people who are on Route 4 traveling through Durham, and part of their commute generates gases in Durham when they're coming through. So it's hard to get really granular information, but it is true that transportation is a significant portion of our emission footprint.
When you measure, a couple of things. When were these numbers generated? You know?
The most recent, I think, were from now, these were 18 or 19. I think the most recent are from 21 that we will use as part of the updated climate action plan.
So, I mean, when you say not granular, but yet we measured at the 1/10%, that seems pretty granular.
Well, it is, but it's using sort of big brush data, and you slice and dice it, and the percentages are what they are. We acknowledge we're using regional data, the best data we can find.
And it says that the Energy Committee suggests that modest reductions in the road program. How is that measured? How much is modest reductions? How do they know that? Might be made without a big impact on residents. Again, what kind of impact are they talking about? It's unclear to me, and I guess I would say that until we know what net zero, what we can spend it on, how can we restrict it to only net zero improvements when it's unclear what we can actually spend it on. There were some examples given, but.
So I tried to, I was the one that wrote up the council communication, but it was under the impetus of the Energy Committee, and Eric Lund, Councilor Lund is working with me and bringing it forward on behalf of the Energy Committee. Not in the communication, but in the resolution itself, it does include a definition of net zero, which is all forms of active transportation and also electric vehicles. The reason it does not include general public transportation is because the town of Durham does not have any spending on public transportation, even though our town benefits from it. Amtrak is entirely privately run. I don't know if they're receiving public funding. Someone else could probably speak to that because someone on the Energy Committee does actually sit on the Riders Advisory Group. But then the Wildcat system is run without any town support. So we're not a large enough municipality to have any public transportation funding, and I don't think that would change anytime soon, but maybe Todd could speak more to that. And then the reason at the top of the council communication initiated by, we can certainly amend that, but that's not an official item of record where it says the town council and energy committee. I had put both in there just because I thought that any council communication had to come from the town council, that it couldn't be just a committee submitting it without having someone from the council willing to submit it on behalf, but that's kind of a point of order thing that perhaps Todd could clarify. And I think hopefully I've answered all the questions available, and then the statewide info was pulled from what is being used by the Commute Smart, so again from statewide resources, which I believe comes from the Department of Energy's own assessment for the state of New Hampshire. But both are coming from the appropriate government entity's official report of those numbers in the latest version.
When I read it, I also had some questions and concerns about approving this. I would have been on the one to actually put that one off for pulling off unanimous consent, because it seems to me that the paragraph that is under the RSA that sort of references legal authority of the accumulation of these funds has, a whole list of applications that the dollars can be used for, and they seem to me to all be really positive areas that monies might be able to go to. And the question is does this, if this resolution goes through, does that mean you can't do this, but you can only do that? And it seems like it would be better to have on an annual basis for whatever it is that we need, or whether we need to accumulate it over more than the 1 year, that it would be better just to leave us able to do it based on this particular RSA and not have to sort of try and define it further than that. So that was sort of my concern.
Councilor Kumar.
I agree with Heather. And can you give us some background on how the money has been used historically? Sure. I mean, it seems like we could use it for the full meter, the parking meter.
Well, and that is
Yeah.
the safety, pedestrian safety for walking, with some of the signs we've been investing in.
Parking facilities, I mean, it's so.
So, tax dollars are always tight, and the council's faced with making choices during each budget season. And it was in that environment where a new law was passed that allowed communities to issue, it was then I think a 2 or 3 EV and things that weren't even on anyone's minds back then. This really represented a new tax, a new fee, a new tax for Durham residents because it was something more. But the council thought it made sense ultimately, amid some criticism for adding a new tax. The council moved forward with it. And the spirit of it was we were struggling to find dollars to do bicycle infrastructure in particular, like bike lanes, bike studies, sidewalks, pedestrian improvements, things like that. And so that was really the primary goal early on for the funds, but it was clear the funds could be used for other road and transit related purposes. We've used it in the past, I'm just going really on memory here, on some bike analysis on some bike lanes, I think one cycle, like painting bike lanes, we charge this account. For a couple of years, we put the money in the budget in case something came up that was an opportune use of the funds over the year, but we didn't use the funds. So we've started to accrue a surplus in our account. It generates the revenue that's generated each year, and the annual revenue is between $27,000 and $28,000 is what we bring in each year. At the present time, let's see, the 2022 town report listed a fund balance of $90,000. That got carried forward, and I've learned is outdated. So the current number is around $165,000 in that account, which is positive, and we can use those funds for any of the uses here. Now, for the coming budget, and there have been a few cycles where I recommended and the council approved using some of the money to offset either sidewalk reconstruction and or just offsetting the road program in some budget difficult years to just make up a difference and come in at a tax rate number. For the coming budget year, the projects that I was envisioning allocating, or recommending allocating the money for, included $60,000 for 2 4-handle electric vehicle chargers that we are currently applying for 80% grant funding on. The account would pay to install those chargers because we have to upfront the monies if we receive the grant, and if we got the grant, we could then reimburse 80% back to the account. In addition, I was thinking that we could utilize these monies to support the continued support of the UNH Cat Tracks program at somewhere between $3,500 and $5,000, $3,500, $5,000. And the other uses I had in my mind are escaping me at the moment while I'm on the spot. I'm sorry. But I had some ideas to how they're used. My preference would be to continue to just allow the state law to be the guide. But I thought we had a really good conversation in the Energy Committee, and Em had provided some examples of what net zero transportation meant and it was intended to mean, and I thought that gave us a lot of leeway. So really the things that it wouldn't allow us to do is to use it for roads, which would be a limitation. But I think it's workable going with this recommendation. My preference would be just to stick with the state statute and to let the council decide each cycle if the funding is a good use or not of the dollars.
As I read it, it could be used for bridges.
Sure, it could be used for bridges.
And we've used it for sidewalks.
Yes, sidewalks,
So
roads,
could we use
bike
this
lanes.
money for the bridge at Long Marsh that the Land Stewardship Council is struggling to figure out how to fund? I mean, that is, Durham has a number of paths, trails, that we're having difficulty maintaining.
Yeah, pedestrian and bicycle facilities, that's a pedestrian kind of facility, I mean, parking, intermodal, electric vehicle charging stations, public transportation. I guess I would want to think about it and maybe talk with legal counsel just to make sure that a pedestrian, that a trail out on a piece of conservation land is what was envisioned versus a sidewalk and crosswalk in a more built environment. No one's ever
We certainly have
suggested
a
that.
need for funds in that area.
Yes,
And they're
we do.
probably not going to happen in this budget year,
Right.
unfortunately. And I know that our trails are quite popular for a lot of people.
Yeah, we don't fund the Amtrak Downeaster. New Hampshire does not designate a penny to the Amtrak Downeaster for the service. Neither do any of the host station communities. The station communities simply support the infrastructure at the station. And in our case, UNH supports 100% of the train station infrastructure. Durham's responsibility is the trestle there. And with mass transit, again, Durham could choose to offer support to Wildcat Transit or Coast, perhaps in exchange for a designated route or additional stops. We haven't done that to the present day. The one thing we have done is we've partnered with UNH in the past to repurpose UNH's old bus shelters, and we've located them on Madbury Road. And so the shelters you see there actually were UNH's that UNH gave to us, and we refurbished them and installed them for
I even think
residents.
about like some of the, back to the pedestrian stuff, I mean, we talked about, you know, the different flashy
Yes, that's
signs.
it.
So those are things that make walking easier around town, right?
Make
It
driving
certainly makes
safer.
it makes the driving safer as well.
And that was the third item, was the
That's the
20,
one.
like $30,000 for an additional RFB on
Right.
Mill Road. That was
Okay,
the other.
yeah, and I'm sure, if we think about it, there'll probably be, well, once we understand more about how the Madbury Road reconstruction helps with traffic calming and pedestrian crossing, I'm sure more will come up. But those are things where all of this would be covered in there to help encourage all of the different styles. And like you said, if it's a charging station, an EV charging station that was brought, well, I don't know if the one that's at Pettibrook isn't sufficient, if it's used constantly, if the capacity problem has been addressed, complained about. But all those would still happen without having to do this, is my opinion.
I wanted to just share a little bit more of the discussion that happened at the Energy Committee, because I think that could be relevant. So part of the thinking in this discussion is that the roads budget for Durham, I think it's well over 2 million. Todd, could you?
So what, the portion
The
of
roads
the
program budget?
Yeah, the
for
portion of
Durham
the-
on an annual basis?
road program budget that this would address is our annual road program, and we target about $500,000 a year.
Okay.
So
$500,000 a year.
on the years where it might be a $700,000 amount, that's a year where I might suggest using some of this money to smooth out that peak in the program. But it
Okay.
would depend.
So of the roads program budget, if it's about 500,000 a year, this is about $27,000 of that. So the majority of the roads program budget would not be affected at all. The thinking of kind of, looking at this small fund that represents kind of the 27,000 and saying we're going to use that for net zero transportation is the active transportation includes all human-powered transportation. So it includes sidewalks, it includes any pedestrian infrastructure, it includes any bicycle infrastructure. It includes multimodal pathways, it includes projects like the Complete Streets Madbury program that support those. And the reason that the Energy Committee thought it was interesting to try and have some funds that are dedicated to that is that it's kind of a way of putting our money where our mouth is as a town, in terms of saying, if we know a lot of carbon emissions come from the transportation sector, then if we commit a small part of the budget, so this is, it's a 5% about of the roadworks program, and say that some portion of that budget every year is going to be spent on some sort of transportation that doesn't add carbon emissions. And although our town has been doing a really great job under this town administrator and under this town council in supporting those projects, we could have a different town council in the coming years, or a different town administrator who doesn't prioritize those projects as much. So Todd has had to be kind of flexible and innovative sometimes in finding the funding sources for these programs, like coming up with the funding for the CAT Tronics program or last year, or coming up with, really taking some more initiative on installing additional EV chargers. And so this is one way of just kind of saying that as a town, we're going to dedicate some small percent of the budget, so 5% every year, towards progress in those programs. And I think it is something that, by and large, Durham has been doing anyway, but it just kind of solidifies our commitment that every year, 5% of that roadworks program, we're going to dedicate that to different projects that support things, transportation options that aren't as polluting. And so that was kind of really the thinking coming from the Energy Committee. And maybe Councillor Lund, do you want to add anything from that conversation?
No, I have nothing to add.
The net zero concept is not included in the RSA in terms of it being described, defined, identified. So I also am concerned we'd be in conflict with the RSA. And when you get to the resolution itself, mixing in New Hampshire Week without driving and this buses, again, without any definitions, it's unclear what we can spend our money on. I recommend that we vote against this resolution.
Any other comments? Councilor Burton?
I remember the presentation, and it made sense to me that we're the big problem driving our cars around town, and I can't tell you the exact number. And at the time, we were spending a lot of time on bike paths and other things. My concern is we should be discussing this in the contents of the whole budget. I would move to table this motion until such time as we are in discussing the whole budget and see how this fits in. If in fact we move it off the table, then it can become part of the budget conversation. And I'm sure that within that conversation, there's going to be lots of discussion about how to improve our carbon footprint.
I'll second that motion.
And I think I have to retract the initial motion.
It'll just be tabled
Yes,
that's on
the floor.
Until
The
there's
initial one.
further, maybe there's updates to it, or maybe there's a larger
So
conversation.
the initial motion was to approve, so this would be an amendment to table.
Yes.
So you could vote on the amendment now.
The tabling motions are non-debatable, as I recall from my vast experience.
Right, so you vote first whether you want to amend it, and then if that passes, then you'd vote whether you want to pass it or not.
But the vote to amend it is not without any discussion, it's just straight up or down?
I differ with you, Todd.
Okay, yes?
You're not amending the motion, you're tabling the motion.
Okay.
You're putting it on
Good
the
point.
table for later action, if any is taken. It happens a lot in various places, including the legislature.
Yes.
When there's a better time to discuss something, or if you're trying to kill something, quite honestly.
Yes.
But in this case, we could save this for when we're doing the budget and seeing how it fits in with everything else.
Councilor Burton is correct.
But so do we have to vote to, no, we have to vote no for the approval.
Just have to vote to table or not table at this point.
Yeah, just, you vote to
And so
table
And
it.
the tabling motions are non-debatable.
You just take the vote.
Let's take the vote.
And then come
Table or
back,
not
and
table.
then come back to the other
Okay.
vote.
And
So-
then any member can move to take the motion off the table, and if it receives the majority votes, then you take it up at that time. And that could happen when we're doing the budget, for example.
So we're going to do a vote on whether to table or not table this motion. And that would be a roll call vote and a yes or no, and,
Just for clarity,
okay.
if someone votes yes, what did they just?
From a member of the body, seconded and voted.
Okay. Are we ready? Start with Councilor Grant.
Yes, for tabling.
James Fubar, no.
Sal Udell, yes.
Joe Friedman, yes.
Wayne Burton, yes.
Eric Lund, yes.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Racer, no.
Okay, so that's,
And-
no, I'm sorry, an M.
Emily?
M. Friedrichs, nay.
So 3 noes, 5,
Six. Yes.
Six
Six
yeses,
yeses,
it's
three
tabled.
noes.
Sounds my math. All right. So it is tabled. All right. All right, so 8H, I will go ahead and read the motion. Move that the Durham Town Council does hereby adopt Resolution 2024-22, recognizing CEH Day and acknowledging the Buses, Bikes, and Brooms Challenge and National Week Without Driving. And I think this is also your
Yes,
choice?
I just found that the town council communication did not put this hashtag into my browser of the buses, bikes, and brooms. I get nothing. I don't know who New Hampshire Healthy Climate is. I don't know the children's environmental health and what that has to do with energy or what it has to do with us and making resolutions approving special weeks in New Hampshire. I just think this council has a lot of other business, and to be taking time and our effort to focus on these projects that really aren't fully described, I don't believe, in a council communication. I have a problem with it, and so that's why I asked it to be discussed further.
Other comments at this point? Do you want to respond, Councilor Friedrichs?
Sure. So a little bit more about Children's Environmental Health Day across the nation on the second Thursday in October by a variety of nonprofits and different government agencies. And the focus of it is really to look at the importance of different environmental factors on children's health, whether that's lead in drinking water or dust, from paint in the home, as well as safe food and consumer products. And there's issues with, consumer recalls of different food products or different materials used in children's items. Increasingly so, it's a focus on the healthy environment and ecosystem and what that means in terms of healthy air from increased forest fires and an increasing need to pay attention to to heat indexes and things like this that are new ways in which children's health are being impacted due to new environmental concerns, PFAS, all sorts of different issues, and stable climates, and how that impacts children's health and development. And so that's something that here, more locally in New Hampshire, there's a nonprofit called New Hampshire Healthy Climate, which consists of different medical professionals in the state, and are particularly looking at the overlap between climate and public health. And so they provide training which medical professionals can use for their licensure around new and emerging kind of health threats related to climate. So increases in tick diseases, increases in heat index, and a variety of other factors, increases in waterborne illnesses that we're starting to see in our public swimming waters and in our lakes and rivers. And so it's something that is being celebrated in New Hampshire as well as across the country, and it's an opportunity to really to bring increased awareness of that. And it's kind of tied together with some additional environmental and climate-related holidays that are being celebrated across the state. So oftentimes, as was the case with New Hampshire Week Without Driving, and it's also true for Children's Environmental Health Day, different nonprofits bring resolutions to different municipal bodies and ask for municipal recognition as a way to increase awareness. And so that's true of the Children's Environmental Health Day. They've brought resolutions to Dover as well. And last year with the New Hampshire Week Without Driving, there were several different municipalities. I think it was in last year's resolution, which is linked in this year's resolution. I think it was Franconia or maybe Franklin, New Hampshire, and another municipality, as well as it's something that's celebrated with the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, as well as the Southern New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, have both been sponsors, and Commute Smart New Hampshire is another sponsor. And so they're different environmental holidays that are being celebrated across New Hampshire as well as nationally, and that different New Hampshire nonprofits have asked municipalities to recognize in some capacity in order to increase awareness. And the opportunity for Durham residents, which we did last year, is to kind of publicize this this acknowledgement in our Friday updates so that residents can know more about these issues and the holidays that are acknowledging them, and also give residents the opportunity to participate in the challenge. I believe last year, I think at least 3 town councilors participated in the New Hampshire Week Without Driving, as well as some town staff, based on kind of that, based on the conversation we had around that, and based on the publicity that came out of Friday updates. I think maybe, Sally, were you one of the counselors that participated in any capacity in New Hampshire Week Without Driving last year? I think Rachel in the town clerk clerk's office also did, and Cardin Welsh did.
So I do have a question that love to know more about buses, bikes, and brooms challenge if we could, but I'm also worried that have we missed an opportunity to increase awareness by missing 2 events on this list that already happened? Or, I mean, we can certainly let people know, but the National Week Without Driving already happened, and the Children's Environmental Health Day also already happened. So we certainly could choose to support them, but we may have missed the opportunity for residents to feel like they're fully participating. But this last one, buses, bikes, and brooms, has it already passed?
It starts October 1, but it continues to 31.
So, I see October 11th, so we still have a chance for the...
But where did you even, where was
It's
the
the 11th.
information even found
So
about
she's
this?
got it hyperlinked
Is
in
it
the
off
text.
Facebook? Is it off Instagram?
So this is from commutersmartnh.org, but there are several other organizations that have published the same information on the Google.
I was going to say, is it something we couldn't have just put into the Friday updates without having to have the paper with it? It has to get managed through our processes.
I would actually agree with that sentiment because I do believe this does fall in line with the town council goals of a low cost or no cost, excuse me, and low effort way to potentially draw attention to reducing our carbon emissions. However, there's nothing being mandated here. We're not tasking anybody with anything. And so really the most benefit we're adding is encouraging support of anything that feels appropriate that gets it out to the public. Because like I said, we're not mandating anything. There's no money being allocated. There's no governmental official that will be monitoring or tracking. It is simply a voluntary citizen and resident effort to decide whether or not they have the ability and capacity to participate in either of these events. And for any of the other special days that make their way up to the town council, we always have the option of voting it down. So that's my recommendation.
And a slight correction, the Children's Environmental Health Day is the second Thursday in October, so
the 10th.
It's the 10th. It has not happened yet.
Oh, this says the
Right,
11th.
but the Friday updates will come out after. So
Okay. So
it will have already happened
Right.
by the time we let.
Again, my concern is the groups themselves. How many people are in these groups? Who are the, who's behind it? How long have they actually been in business? Are we supporting a group that we know anything about?
Does anybody know what the reference to brooms means?
It might have
Witches.
Halloween.
And so is this,
Oh, that's why it's.
Joe?
I guess, so who is actually behind this?
Right.
Satan.
Is there some, is there a coven in the
And when it says it's supported by individuals,
garage?
yes. And when it says it's supported by individuals, nonprofits, and government agencies, which ones? Are there any in New Hampshire that have supported it? Councilor Friedrich did mention a couple. We've got no background on this, though, and we're being asked to support these organizations with virtually no background information on who they are.
So if you follow the links that were provided, the website for Children's Environmental Health Day does provide more information on sponsoring and participating organizations, in addition to the New Hampshire Healthy Climate. The buses, bikes, and brooms challenge, that name was chosen by New Hampshire entities, and Commute Smart New Hampshire is a state entity. It's a state government entity. And they've had that name since at least 2013. So that kind of incentive was based on disability awareness. Initially, it was adopted by various New Hampshire entities, which is why we voted on it and supported it last year. I fully take responsibility for the fact that that particular, the New Hampshire Week Without Driving dates, those that have passed, that was my fault. I missed those dates. I thought it worth mentioning because we had recognized it last year. But if people feel uncomfortable recognizing, including that because it has passed, that makes sense. I think the other two are very relevant for this week.
I know I appreciate Councilor Register's suggestion that we don't necessarily need a resolution, but...
That was Ms. Grant's. I can't steal her thunder.
Oh, okay. Don't necessarily need a resolution, but just take the opportunity to make these items this year out to the public. Any other comments? So there is a motion out there to adopt this resolution, recognizing CEH Day and acknowledging the Bus, Bikes, Brooms Challenge and National Week Without Driving. Don't believe, though, that I have a second.
Second.
Second, Councilor Lund. Any more discussion? All right. This will be a roll call vote. Yes in the affirmative, or no, or aye, or nay, whichever you want to use. Roll call vote. Can we start with Councilor Grant?
Heather Grant, nay.
James Bubar, nay.
Cy Nidell, nay.
Joe Friedman, nay.
Wayne Burton, yes.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Register, aye.
Okay.
M. Friedrichs, aye.
All right. So we have a resolution to recognize these days. It passes. It passes. All right.
Before we move
Yes.
on, are we supposed to sign this? This was the...
That would be, if it probably would get us ahead if people could sign it tonight, yes? Pass it around?
Yes.
Just
Yes,
sign
great.
each one individually and just give them to
Just
you?
pass it along. Well, or to have one and just use, can we use your copy to pass around?
Yeah, sign it, I'll sign it, and then we'll move it around.
Great, thank you. For those of you watching, that was to sign the warrant articles so that we can hold an election here in
Yes.
November. Important election. Thank you. All right, so we have a few presentations tonight. The first one is from Dr. Robert Schaps from the Superintendent for Oyster River Cooperative. Thank you for your patience.
Welcome.
Thank you. So it's actually my second time. I had the opportunity to introduce myself back in August before the start of the school year, and so it's great to be back just to give you an update on start of the school year. I wanted to take this opportunity just to introduce Matt Bagan, our school board chair, is here this evening as well, so thank you. I would say by all accounts, it's been a great start to the school year. I have to admit that I don't have anything to measure it by from prior years, but just in the feedback and comments about our faculty, parents, students, just a lot of excitement and joy to be back in school. It's already at the high school, I think, progress reports in the first quarter, so it's quickly moving. It's hard to believe it's just the start of our second month of the academic year. I brought along for counselors our enrollment report for the October 1st, if I can just share the passage.
Is that the official count of students for the
Yes,
year?
thank you. Yes, it's the official October 1st enrollment report that we submit to the state. So, yes, thank you.
Just one page. It's just one page?
Just one page. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I just want to share an update on. Great. So as of October 1, we have 2,068 students, K through 12. I would say that includes both our resident students and tuition students. We have a tuition agreement with the town of Barrington. And so overall, I would just say it's a slight downward trend for total enrollment. Most notably at the middle school, where we are below 600 students. It's probably about I would say 41 student decline, which we had anticipated. And we do know that over the next several years, we'll see just a slight reduction in the middle school level of students as cohorts of elementary students come through the system. I would say one surprising enrollment data point is that our kindergarten enrollment was higher than expected. We tend to have alternating years of decline and an increase. This year we had an increase both at Massway and Mohammed, so that's slight improvements at the elementary. So I just wanted to give you that information. I would say, working with the school board this year, we have an ambitious agenda that we're focusing on. At this point, we are in the midst of developing the budget for the 25-26 school year, so more to come on that. That is a big part of our time. The board is committed to working with the administration to develop a long-term capital plan. And so a lot of work is underway doing a building needs assessment of three of our four schools, obviously not at the middle school. But it's really to provide an exact understanding of all of the aspects of our buildings, which is really important. Similarly, we are in early spring going to begin and inviting the community to be a part of developing a new strategic plan. So a lot of work coming, I would say, probably beginning in February in terms of community conversations and engagement in terms of the future of our schools and what we want our schools to be in the next 5 to 10 years. We are currently negotiating with our teachers, working to extend the Barrington tuition agreement for another 10 years and have stability to our partnership with Barrington, which has been quite successful. As you can see, we have about 176 students and 9 through 12 coming from the Barrington school system as well. I have been, throughout this fall, engaging in public conversations. I would call community conversations with parents at all levels to generate conversations, get their perspectives on the state of our schools. And so it's been a great opportunity just to be able to have two-way conversations, understanding the perspectives of parents, using that as a reporting mechanism in December to the school board and the community about how we can identify new priorities and actions to support our work going forward as well. One interesting point, today I had the opportunity to participate in the high school debate class as they were debating the new cell phone policy. It's really interesting. This is a national issue, but I would say as a local school district, it's really important to understand the impact around cell phone use with adolescents and all students, I would say. And so it was nice to hear both sides of the argument and have our students weigh in, especially the seniors who this is obviously their last year, trying to see if they could skate through this. And we're excited to support this going forward and seeing the impact on both the social emotional well-being of students and just their overall academic performance as well. So that's generally just what's happening. As you can imagine, a lot of big items on our plate. I wanted to just thank the council and town council as well as Todd and all of our Durham partners from last week's water main break to support with the SRO program to ongoing partnerships around opening schools during the road construction or road improvement projects. It's been great communication, great partnership, and I would say as a new superintendent coming in, it's been just a positive around the relationship with the town administrator and all the other departments. So I appreciate that and thank you on behalf of our students, our faculty, and parents as well. So I don't know if you have any questions. I would say that certainly I've enjoyed the opportunity to spend a lot of time in classrooms in the month of September. I think I visited 27 of our classrooms, engaging in conversations, getting a good sense of how instruction and teaching and learning is unfolding throughout the school, and also hoping to make connections to our broader community in terms of really taking the learning that is happening in the schools out into the community and looking for partners as well. Yes?
I'm not sure which school is where, but I've heard that in one of the, I guess it would be K through 4, either Massway or Meharmet, that you actually had to take the music room and turn it into a classroom. And I'm just curious, where are you on capacity?
It's a great question. So last spring, prior to my arrival, there was a conversation, as I mentioned, higher than expected enrollment for kindergarten, which really, I would say at Mohammed in particular, put a lot of pressure on space utilization. So currently, just to clarify, we've moved our art class into the commons area, have a art classroom there because we needed that last general classroom space. So in response to your just general questions, we are pretty much at our limit based on the school board class size guidelines and the number of sections that we have presently. It is looking at classroom expansion. In other words, working with our architectural firm to say, how could we add classroom space over the next several years to accommodate what we think is going to be an increasing enrollment, but overall space needs. Second, there was an ongoing conversation about Mastway, which is our elementary school in Lee, where there's a need based on occupancy to expand the cafeteria area. We just have limited space. And so that was it's a second capital, I'd say, project that's underway this fall. And the third, as I mentioned, is just an overall building needs assessment. And that really, to me, was a recommendation to say, let's become clear in terms of a path forward, thinking about the immediate pressures, thinking about the future, and really getting a good assessment of all of our school buildings. The high school, we know, is in some ways under duress for space utilization as well. So really stepping back to get a comprehensive report, which will inform the board. That process has led in the last few weeks actually to step back to more look at school expansion. One of the things we've learned through the spaces that those professionals are working under really are compromised relative to the domino effect of how we keep moving things around. So fundamentally, I think we're trying to say, how do we get strategic to look at the entirety of our program, look at our space and enrollment, and make sound decisions in the long haul. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but the space occupancy threshold is real. And the enrollment is a little bit unknown, but we know that it'll continue to be an issue going forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
As you know, there's an issue in the state now about freedom accounts and public money being spent on private education and on homeschoolers. A few years ago, I checked, and I was told by the assistant superintendent at Oyster River that about a third of the homeschooled students are a grade behind when they get into high school at Oyster River. And that's not to say there's some great parents who homeschool their children. But that's bound to be more of an issue now, as parents can get paid to homeschool their children. Do you feel we have enough control or monitoring in place in order to track students? And they don't, and I'm just curious if that's come up.
So it's a great question. I would say, first of all, looking at our enrollment, we've actually seen a drop in reported number of families that tell us that they have opted to homeschooling as an option for families. I really can't comment on, I would say, the general impact around students coming back into the system. I would say that obviously we believe in the strength of the public schools. We believe in the quality of the learning that's happening each day. And so obviously as students, if they begin with us in kindergarten, we like to say, what is the positive impact on that experience in terms of education? So it's hard for me to kind of say, do I believe that there's some deficit or impact around homeschoolers coming into the public school system. But there definitely is, I would say, a lack of oversight and I would say partnership in New Hampshire versus in my prior experience in New York, where parents had to, if they decided to homeschool, submit the curriculum and the program that they were using, as well as quarterly grades throughout the year, and had the district provide that oversight.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Good evening, sir. I am Curtis Register. I was UA the last time you came and spoke to the council, so I did want to introduce myself. I also am the guy who reports to the council for the school board, so I want to say thank you very much for your calm and collected leadership. I've enjoyed watching you manage different levels of emotions, and if there's anything I can do or the council can discuss to assist the school board, I'd love to be a part of that conversation. As well as Dr. Schatz, I really appreciate how you've grabbed the baton at a sprint. It has been, I mean, you had the water main break or whatever it was, day one before school starts, and we still got the school starting on time and safely. I definitely also love anything that flattens out the decision makers' access to the general population to get a clearer sight picture. And I'd actually be very interested in attending one of your community discussions. I know you have one on the 28th. What time is that?
So we have one tomorrow evening. It's the fourth of the community conversations at the high school for high school parents, but
Okay.
generally the community. And I think as we move closer to, I would say, our strategic planning, certainly inviting the broader
Bust in
community to
then.
conversations. No, but that'd be wonderful. We'd love your participation.
Sure. And tomorrow night, high school, what time?
7 o'clock.
7 p.m. Roger. I did want to see if I could link up and at some point, and when it's appropriate, and take a look at each of the facilities when time allots, not necessarily the same day, and definitely as we can get it into the margins, because I'm just interested in see how the school. I got a youngin' that's coming in next year. He's a 6-year-old, so you got one more coming. And then I also will be interested in discussing and understanding our active shooter response capabilities, as well as your confidence in that safe conduct as well. Besides that, I really appreciate you guys coming down here and taking the time. I want to build a collaborative relationship. I want to help facilitate that collaborative relationship, and I definitely look forward to working with you two and understanding how we can benefit each other, as well as interested in tying in collaboratively for mutual shared spaces, particularly with maybe the Parks and Rec department. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming in, and nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you. Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? for
I
Dr.
have
Sheps?
2 questions as well. The first, I was wondering if the school board has applied for any of there's quite a bit of electric school bus funding out there. And given how outstanding Oyster River School District has been in general with its sustainability initiatives, I was hoping to hear that the school board had reopened looking at applying for some electric bus grants.
I would say that it's part of our transportation plan. We are looking at and moving to electric to the extent possible. And I can't speak to whether the school board has supported grants per se, but certainly that's something we've been discussing going forward.
That would be
And
Ruby.
then, yes. My second question, was wondering about the agreement with Barrington. I think my understanding is that for increased housing, especially affordable housing in Durham, and so I do have a little bit of a question or concern. If Oyster River signs a new agreement with Barrington for 10 years, is the school district locked into that agreement for 10 years where the school district must provide, public school for Barrington residents for those years, or is there possibility to renegotiate year to year depending on enrollment?
So thank you for that question. Currently, that the agreement that's been in force is going to end in June. We've extended each year. The current agreement, as well as the successor agreement, would allow for notice, a 4-year notice that would provide for an end on either party. So I would say that there is protection because in this particular case, it's limited to 9th grade through 12th grade. So as a cohort comes in, if the school board decided because of space concerns or enrollment concerns we needed to terminate, it would be a notification clause, and it would really run through the 4-year of students coming in at this point. So I think we're confident that it brings some level of stability in terms of our enrollment plan, and it provides.
Renegotiating the Barrington agreement, I think.
Yes, that's what I was referring to.
The last time we did that, we did an RFP and got bids from 4 different towns, Newmarket, Barrington, there was some other ones. Are you going to issue an RFP this time? Or just,
no, this is an extension of an existing agreement. So there was an original agreement that went to the community, and then there's been successor agreements, and this is just a continuation of the partnership we have.
Thank you.
You had something?
Just to note that we have our general election coming up on November 5th, and the school district and our election officials hosted a great meeting last week that was about an hour with Public Works and school facility staff to talk through all the logistics. And just so for the community's benefit, the school district actually canceled school on the dates of our election so that we have the benefit of that facility. We really appreciate the partnership.
Absolutely, and we're going to have our faculty at the high school move to do our professional work that day. at the middle school, so we want to be able to be accommodating. And again, I just want to thank Todd for, it's been a wonderful partnership and support. We had conversations in August about EEE and how we could work together, so it's really been a good start in terms of how we work together and share resources and think about continuing opportunities.
I'm actually talking to Todd. Based on the work that Rich Rain and his team did when they were looking at the trash trucks and the EV and those issues, would it be appropriate to perhaps create some dialogue in case they do want to look at electric buses as to how the whole analysis problem and the logistics and the routing?
Yeah,
because of the, you know, the heat and the cold and...
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that previously, a year ago and prior to that, maybe 3 years ago, the district did look at electric buses and it determined that they were not yet ready for, they wouldn't meet our needs locally.
Right.
Based on local conditions. But that's not to say they won't as time evolves. And Public Works is at your disposal. If we can provide any guidance, we're happy to.
We appreciate it. It's an ongoing investigation, and certainly I think the board is committed to pursuing this and seeing how and when we're ready and when the technology will support it, given our conditions and needs as well.
Great.
Thank you very much. Another presentation from our current Stratford Regional Planning Commission Executive Director Jen Size. How do you pronounce your last name?
Sis.
Sis, sorry. Thank you.
I'm just going to take a quick... I am just going to distribute a couple handouts here first. I'll send you the ones that are just random notes. So first is just a broad overview of what I'm going to, some of what I'm going to talk through tonight.
Oh, can you, that's just a reminder, you have to use the mic, thank you.
Sorry. So the first thing I'm passing around, I'll bring another 5 copies of our annual report, so I'll circulate those. Obviously not enough for everyone, but just in the spirit of a little bit of paper conservation, try to, go a share.
And we can get it on the website anyway.
It is, everything is on the website as well.
I know how to reach it.
So, a couple of the annual reports of the overview. Some of the annual reports. Okay.
Paper. It's easy for me to read.
Oh, here's a couple business cards.
For sure.
Yeah, I just put a few business cards in there for anyone who I haven't met previously to make your success when you hear your work come back to you like 360 degrees. So sitting through the first half of the meeting was pretty exciting. And I hope to just maybe touch on a few of the things that you also discussed previously and maybe answer any questions that you might have as I go through. I'm going to do just kind of a high-level, more informal overview of who we are and what we do and some of the programs and activities that we have ongoing. Perfectly okay, feel free to interrupt me and ask some questions as we go. I'd rather have a conversation than a one-way presentation. So annually I try to stop by and visit each of the 18 communities in the Stratford region. And you're thinking to yourself, 18, Stratford. So we are not the county. We are not affiliated with the county. We are a regional entity. And so, yes, all 13 communities in Stratford County are part of the Stratford Regional Planning Commission, as are 3 towns in Rockingham County and 2 from Carroll County. Don't ask why. I'm not sure. So who are we and what do we do? So part of that question of why do we have 18 and not 13 and not the county is we are a regional planning commission established under state statute. What that means is we have a variety of statutory obligations that we fulfill to help you, our member communities, plan for land use, the environment, transportation, economic development, a whole range of your typical planning themes and topics. We also have 2 federal designations. One is that of a metropolitan planning organization, and what that is that regional transportation entity that works between municipalities and the state and federal government to plan for the future of transportation infrastructure. So in this realm, a lot of times you hear us talking about roads and cars and infrastructure improvements or safety improvements, but we also do the kind of the opposite, and some of the things that you were talking about earlier of how do we get people off the roads. And so we'll do what we call transportation demand management. Really, really wonky way of saying, how do we carpool? How do we do things other than drive our own vehicles by ourselves back and forth every day? It, you know, for a variety of benefits, maybe environmental benefits, maybe traffic congestion benefits. And so in this realm of transportation planning, we host different events like buses, bikes, and brooms. So you asked about Commute Smart New Hampshire. Well, part of what we do as a metropolitan planning organization is we collaborate with the other regions in New Hampshire to promote some different activities like this. And so Commute Smart New Hampshire and its smaller sister organization, the Commute Smart Seacoast, these are initiatives that were created by the regional planning commissions. In the case of Commute Smart Seacoast, that also involved Coast, the bus service for this area. And the goal was, how do we reduce traffic on our highways? And how do we promote alternative ways of commuting? And so buses, bikes, and brooms is one of 2 annual events that we help promote and encourage participation in. And it just tries to get folks to think about different ways to get to work each day. So whether you telecommute, you ride a bike, ride a scooter because it has, you know, fewer miles per gallon. However it is, so that's one of those like different fun things that we try to do on the side. We as staff also participate and have little competitions in the office. And the buses, bikes, and brooms, that's one of the individual ones. But the spring challenge is you form teams with other folks you work with and compete in transportation planning. So that's a long way of covering what we do as a transportation planning organization. The third federal hat that we wear is that of an economic development district. This is our most recent designation. And again, we do, you know, just what that is. A lot of comprehensive economic development planning, working with our communities to think about what resources and support that they need to meet their economic development goals. So let's take a step back to you know, who the commission is and how we're governed. So we are under statute. It's all laid out as to commissioners and their appointment by the communities. So each community in the region gets a minimum of 2 commissioners that they get to appoint and send to the Regional Planning Commission. And so Wayne, Councilor Burton is one of your commissioners, Michael Lerman is another one of your commissioners, and you actually have a 3rd seat that is currently vacant. So your commissioners convene monthly, the 3rd Friday of the month from 9 to 10:30, and during those monthly meetings, they act in that governance role for all 3 of our entities, the Regional Planning Commission, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and when we convene as the MPO, we often call ourselves the Policy Committee, because that's the federal term for when we convene as that transportation group, and then the Economic Development District's Board of Directors. So I know, like, and then amongst the commissioners, they vote and assign different members of themselves to serve. Additionally, we have a regional impact committee that also is comprised of commissioners. So getting to the question about the West End development, is it or isn't it? It's up to a local land use board when they receive an application every application, technically, a local land use board should be looking at and saying, is it or isn't it a development of regional impact? If they say maybe it is, or yes it is, then they have to vote as such. And then it gets sent to the Regional Planning Commission, as well as the potentially impacted communities. And as a result, those folks like the Planning Commission, the potentially impacted communities, they only receive a butter status. So that grants us the opportunity to compile some information and present that to the planning board or the zoning board that may be hearing the case. As a Planning Commission, when we receive that regional impact notice, we'll take a look at it and we'll first say, does this have kind of like a de minimis impact? If it does, we might just write a little bit of note saying, thank you so much. We don't really see any huge impacts to the surrounding communities, but thank you for taking this into consideration. On a larger project, however, what we will do is we do a staff review. We do not look at local regulations. That's not our place. That's not our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction isn't even really that because we have no teeth. We're advisory. We focus on that regional impact. How do things work between communities? And so we might look at traffic. You know, if there's a single road that connects through another community, what is the traffic impacts to the other community? We can do some peer reviews of some of those studies. We can also look at maybe what some of the GIS data is telling us, but we're not engineers. We're not going to do a major impact study. We're just going to be thinking about it and presenting some comments or some notes as to how the abutting communities might be impacted and some considerations to take into the decision making. So that's another little tangent planned based on the beginning.
Jen, can I just ask you a question? This is important.
Yeah.
When I read the law, it talks about abutters, which for us are Dover, Lee, Madbury, so forth.
Right.
Whereas the impact could well go into Somersworth, Rochester, and Portsmouth, and Newington, and so forth.
Correct. So when you're making that determination, you have to think about what are the communities that could be potentially impacted. It's not just necessarily the communities that directly abut you.
Okay. I don't think the law is pretty clear on that, though. But okay.
Okay.
I take your word for it.
All right. So some other things that we do as commissioners in addition to the monthly meetings is we have started to organize what we affectionately refer to as quarterly field trips. These are more of an opportunity for our commissioners to get out and go to the other communities in the region and directly hear from the folks that are working on these different projects that we're sharing with them on a regular basis. So our very first one was here. Yay! And Todd was one of our featured speakers. So we did a joint tour here in Durham with UNH and the town. And we had a mix of speakers from both that shared some of the work that was going on. Beverly Cray from UNH, she drove the bus herself and took us on a tour using one of the Wildcat buses. It was just phenomenal, and I thought everyone was just really excited, and that has just set the tone for our subsequent trips. I am happy to share, seats are limited, but our next field trip is coming December, and we will be passing through Durham as we ride on the Downeaster from Dover to Exeter. And so we're going to be doing a joint field trip of commissioners between our region and Rockingham Planning Commission to the south, as we'll be starting visiting and then returning back to Dover. So that is something that we have coming up, really looking to hear from the folks along the route. And so we'll be following up as we get those details ironed out. I think that's kind of like everything I wanted to cover on commissions and committees before I go into just some project updates.
Jen, I just wanted to throw out there that actually Councilor Register and I are both involved now with the Great Bay Changemakers program, and I've been really impressed with their organization of of different field trips and presenters thus far, and so would strongly encourage commissioners to check that out, or for the Planning Commission to perhaps arrange some of their field trips with them. They've been doing a really great job so far.
Yeah, that's a great idea, and that's actually a project that I know our environmental planning staff have been working on in collaboration with the Great Bay 2030 working groups. Okay.
You did mention that you don't have any teeth, but you do control a 10-year plan for transportation construction,
Yes.
which is not unimportant, as I found out.
It is true. That is true. So I'm going to jump over one of my project updates and kind of go to that wing. Improvements. And as part of that, I'll kind of step back in the planning process. We start with what's called MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That's that 40-year planning horizon. Because crazily enough, that is how long it takes to get transportation projects, to fruition. So we start with that big picture brainstorming and coming up with project ideas. And so we'll do a project solicitation for that long-range transportation plan. And then we always have more projects than there is money for. So we'll go from that and we will do regionally. The commissioners get together, and this is another reason why it's really important to have commissioners at the table, is the commissioners get together and look at those projects and score those projects to look at what that regional impact is and benefit of the various projects. And these are projects that are coming from the municipalities or federal funding. And then they have to narrow down that list, decide what goes to the state, what goes to the Department of Transportation for inclusion in the 10-year transportation plan. And that's something that then goes through a subsequent process with the Executive Council, the Governor, and then ultimately legislature before it's adopted. So you need to get into that 10-year plan to get a project funded. So that is a really, really good point. So I know in Durham, we have this great project, fabulous safety improvements, Durham Point Road, and it wasn't eligible because it's not a federal aid eligible road. And that's purely based upon its classification and designation. So kind of taking that project, so it didn't go forward in the 10-year plan in that last funding cycle because of eligibility, but it's still on our list of projects because it's important. So we start thinking about what are the other pools of funding and other ways we can help move this project forward. So remember, we're in that 20 to 40 year time frame here. That went through in a different pool of funding. You're right though. But that went through in a different pool of funding. That went through in one of the competitive grant programs.
But I want to compliment you because when our project didn't get funded because of what you said, I think Rich and worked with you to get the funding in for it, which was really a good thing to do. And I appreciate that very much. I'm sure Rich and the town does too.
Yeah, so what we're currently working on is called Safe Routes for All. This is something where there's 4 MPOs in New Hampshire. We teamed up, put together a single application into USDOT, into federal highways, for funding to prepare the action plans. The action plans are a prerequisite for implementation dollars under the Safe Streets for All program federally. This funding pool is eligible for local roads. So that project that would not fit into the state 10-year plan would fit under Safe Streets for All. And so that's something that we're already folding into that conversation because we've already evaluated that project and done some of that conceptual engineering for it. We have all that information that's going to go into the Safe Streets for All action plan, which will now make the project eligible for this other pool of funding. So that's asked VHB, the consultant that's doing the action plans, to also look at the micromobility devices, particularly here, as a safety concern. And then I know they've completed the data analysis phase, and they've ranked all of the roadways in the region for their level of severity, for serious accidents and fatalities. And there's a section of Main Street that is ranked 6th in the region. That's not good. Number 1 is not where you want to be on this list. So that's just something that'll kind of, again, raise some dollars for awareness. So just kind of really quickly going back, and I'll just do a really quick mention of this. We are about to kick off an update to our comprehensive plan. This was last done in 2014. So we have an update to our long-range transportation, our comprehensive economic development strategy, and then our regional plan that we're going to be doing simultaneously, pulling that all together, and a focus on balancing development and natural resource protection. So that's going to be the theme for that plan update.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When you are working on your 40-year transportation plan, which I will never probably see the end of,
I don't know that I would either,
how,
so it's okay.
How are you, I'm assuming housing has a substantial impact on that, and how are you estimating the growth in housing by communities?
Sure. So that's something that, kind of going back a year and a half ago now, we completed a major update to regional housing needs assessment, and through that, we have updated population projections for the state. We also have updated housing demand projections for the state, and so those housing demand projections were prepared at the municipal level. So we have that input just to understand, what demand is. I mean, we all know.
And how often do you do that?
Demand magically when there are dollars appropriated for that.
Does the housing projection demand sync up with the state RSA, and I forget what they call it, the workforce housing? And
yes.
It does?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this most recent iteration of the housing demand projections not only looked at like the total number of units, but also then broke it out by renter and owner occupied, as well as above and below the workforce housing definitions.
Thank you.
We regularly produce a whole suite of data resources. So there's a few highlights in your packet of those different materials that we have available online. I believe for everything we've provided like a written out URL so that you can find it easily on our website. On the environmental planning side, the other area, I'd just like to take a quick moment to just highlight several of the projects, not in any depth. Our environmental planning team has been very active in working with the town of Durham over the past several years. Hazard mitigation plan, thank goodness, made it finally through the FEMA review process. It was probably the first plan in New Hampshire that utilized new guidance from FEMA, which made it a little bit more challenging to get it through. But we kind of not prematurely, but we said, let's go for it and let's use the new guidance because Durham was already really well prepared to do so because of the amount of climate planning. We annually have a U.S. coastal zone technical assistance grant, and this year in that we have a couple projects written into that grant to work on with the town, continuing some work to scope out the Long Marsh Road culvert replacement project that has struggled to qualify for some of the FEMA grants out there. So working on that cost benefit analysis and kind of moving things along there. So that's one of them. The other piece that we've added this year is working specifically to incorporate some climate change and other resilience measures into the town's forest management plan for Doe Farm. We have some continuing outreach and engagement work that to go with the next phase of the Living Shoreline project at Wagon Hill Farm. So again, partnering to help with some of those outreach and engagement materials. I think that's...
You've overlooked the great strength of the SRPC.
Yeah.
Yeah, because unlike this body, which chose to do their roundtable at the end, so it cannot have going on in their town, gets a chance to do so. And I really like that part of it, because I learned from Somersworth and Rochester and the rest of the towns what they're doing and find out commonalities and others. And I thought that's really one of the main strengths of the SRPC. And especially since you've taken over, you've got much better attendance at the meetings. And I credit you with making that happen.
Thank you, Wayne. I'll give Dave Landry, our chairman of the commission, credit for putting your roundtable at the beginning of the meeting. And
he walks his dog with me every morning at Wagon Hill.
Very nice. But to that point, and that comes back to the fundamental purpose of having a regional planning commission, and that is an opportunity for the towns in the region to get together, share ideas, learn from each other, and work collaboratively. And so for us...
Questions or comments?
I don't have any real questions. I do have a comment. I was just perusing some of the data points that you provided, as well as the links on the sites, and I really enjoy the access to the information. I've saved and bookmarked a couple of them. I've already learned a couple things since you started talking. Did not know our area was a net exporter of labor. That's something over 15,000, 45,000 folks live here and work elsewhere. Didn't know that. And I also didn't know that 50% of the rental units likely have high lead in them. That is an interesting data point as well. I do think, dang, my brain just quit. That is interesting. Oh no, I do have to correct myself, because I didn't realize how ignorant I was. I didn't know that you guys were not just Stratford County. That makes me realize I need to educate myself on what the county does and where their purview is. But thank you very much for coming briefly.
You're welcome.
And I just wanted to say, Jen, thanks for sharing that information about your use of the current FEMA data. And this week and last week, as we're all thinking about Hurricane Helene and the other hurricane that's coming up on the southeast U.S., it's just so nice to hear that you guys have been thinking ahead and trying to plan for these changes, because I think that there are a lot of towns that might not think they would be as affected, and they're seeing really harsh consequences. And so to just see that you as a planning commissioner on top of using the best possible data is really reassuring. So thank you for making that push and doing that work. And I hope all of our participating communities know about that and are feeling really good about the fact that we're looking ahead as much as we can now.
So I just wanted to note that Durham really has a great partnership with SRPC, and to a certain extent, we're constrained as a municipality because although we do a great job with visioning and planning, we don't have areas that you've talked about tonight to say, hey, Durham, we see some grant money, and we see you have a goal or a vision heading in that direction. Mm-hmm. Can we work with you? Mm-hmm. And we end up being like a beta site for a lot of projects that they see and bring to us, and then together we move stuff forward. So it's a good partnership, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and that's just another thing. Just like to use the analogy that because the sectors that we work in are so broad, we have a lot of different expertise at the staff level, and use us to deepen your bench. Reach out and give us a call at any point.
That's good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Patient and waiting to get your chance.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair,
yes.
Just for Curtis's thing, the jail, the registry of deeds, the nursing home, and the social programs are run by the Stratford County, and the legislative body is the legislative body for this region. So they have that 4 functions.
Thank you.
All right.
They have the largest budget of all of us,
Makes sense.
$70 million.
Gotta have those jails stocked.
All right, so next we have a presentation from Public Works and proposed changes to new ordinance 2024-08, amending chapter 118. And so the counselors all have had a chance to look at that great picture. Have had a chance to look at the ordinance, so we're interested to hear what you have to say tonight.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity to provide a briefing on our proposed changes to the solid waste program and the necessary ordinance changes that we'll be putting in place. So you can see a little bit about solid waste here. We have various components in our program. They include the collection of waste and recyclables, the transportation of waste and recyclables, processing by a third-party vendor, and also the promotion of sustainable practices and the diversion of waste from our landfills. My name is Rich Rain. I'm the Public Works Director, and I'm joined here by Sam Hewitt, who is the Assistant Public Works Director. So over the last 2 years plus, Public Works has been working very closely with IMAC and others to develop options for program improvements, and we greatly appreciate everybody's participation in that. And I see Susan was here, Susan Richmond, who sits on IMAC, but the entire IMAC group has been very helpful in pulling this program together. These ordinance updates are essentially the last major step as part of the automated collection program and some of the changes we are proposing up at the transfer station. The next steps will be our public outreach and our procurement of various equipment, so trucks and collection carts. So dependent on the lead times of those items, we're looking at a rollout of our automated collection program with the single stream recycling in 2025, probably the summer or fall of 2025. We may be looking at an early action which would have the carts distributed before that, our current user friendliness of the program itself. So today what we'd like to do is provide you with kind of a brief overview of the automated collection program that's been developed, and then also go through the Chapter 118 solid waste ordinance revisions that we've put in place. We've worked, like I say, with IMAC. IMAC has endorsed these changes, and we had a couple wordsmithing and some formatting that we'll have to deal with. I get some emails from Councilor Bubar as well as others with a couple things that we'll still have to change with references to articles and numbers. We've kind of taken those into account, and we have a revised version, but overall the document that is in your packet is the finalized document that we would bring forward on a public hearing if you schedule one on November 4th. So with that, why don't I turn it over to Sam, and Sam will start to go through the presentation. So
great. Thanks, Rich.
there you go.
So before we could build our new program, we had to better understand the details of our existing program. And to do that, we undertook a series of comprehensive audits during the winter of 2022 and 2023, where we collected data from approximately 1,900 collection points in town that we service on a weekly basis. The intent of those audits was to gather information on metrics such as participation, quantity of disposed materials, recycling participation, and contamination levels in the specific streams. So in total, we collected 2 data points per collection point. We went out once during a fiber week and once during a commingled week. So in total, we have data from approximately 3,600 points to work with. Next slide. So this is just a very zoomed out map showing all of the collection points we gathered information from. You go to the next slide, Rich. It just zooms in further, and you can see there's a pie chart at each one of those points, and those colors just denote recycling versus homes which had greater recycling volumes than trash. I'll also note that the bottom part of the screen, there's a gray dot, and that's a home that did not participate in either of our weeks of collection. So this is some of the data that we collected. As I said, a little over 1,900 collection points per week we audited, broken down Monday through Thursday below. What's important to notice and take away from this slide is that approximately 92% of the homes we collected from can fit their waste in a 64-gallon container or below. And that 64 gallons is a critical volume when it comes to discussing standardized container sizes, which we'll touch on a little bit later. I'll call out one more thing, and that's that gray bar that shows that about 17% or 334 homes did not participate in either week. But we found that that lines up pretty well with the average daily car volumes that go through the transfer station in the wintertime. So those are just folks that elect not to put anything curbside and visit the transfer station instead. So some general observations from the audit in the field. We found a large disparity between minimum and maximum refuse generation. A lot of collection points just had loose bags piled on the ground, which caused increased collection times at those points. Oftentimes we found that bags were broken into, that were put out the night before, either by animals or other vectors, possibly some weather conditions as well. And also that a lot of recycling containers did not have lids. So wind-induced scattering is often a big problem for us, and that just leads to less efficiency at each collection point, because our drivers are often out trying to collect as much of that recycling as possible, further limiting the amount of points we can collect daily. Next slide. So these are just some pictures, again, illustrating what I said. A lot of loose trash bags, recycling containers that were knocked over either by animals or wind. A lot of non-conforming materials. I think the next picture shows a vacuum cleaner that was put out curbside. So we do find a lot of that in the stream. Keep going.
Well, there's yours. Take that.
So, with the data now known, we began to dive deeper into the concept of automated collection and the benefits this type of program could have in Durham. Based on discussions with automated vehicle manufacturers, along with other municipalities that are operating current or similar programs rather, we found that we could utilize a split body vehicle to collect both trash and recycling, which is different from our current method, as many of you know, where we have two vehicles with two operators. Some communities are doing one operator, with one vehicle. We found that we'd be able to increase the number of collection points per day through efficiencies gained in just solely in the fact that the operators would not have to exit the vehicles at each collection point. They would just be responsible for using a joystick and a mechanical arm to pick up a single container for both trash and recycling. These split body trucks also have a much larger holding capacity of material compared to our current vehicles, which again will just allow for increased efficiencies as we look to shorten our routes and combine streams into one vehicle. And finally, we learned that these trucks promote a safer worker environment. by minimizing physical strain, operators aren't getting in and out, handling very heavy containers, reducing their risk of injury. I'm going to talk about that. Another added value is that greenhouse gas emissions will be reduced through this program. We're running 2 diesel side loading machines. On average, those are emitting 285 metric tons of CO2 per year. That's based on a calculation we did. And as you all know, we are proposing to purchase an electric ASL with DERA funds, which would cut that back even further to just shy of 30 metric tons. So, as I alluded to, there'll be a lot of efficiencies gained through this type of program, and we feel that based on the data we collected, the conversations we've had with other municipalities and with ASL manufacturers, we feel confident that we'll be able to collect all of Durham's trash and recycling, including our commercial customers that we service for recycling only, in 4 to 5 days. With 1 vehicle as opposed to 2. This operating plan will require single stream collection, which we recognize is more costly to dispose of, but it's outweighed by the efficiencies and benefits gained through weekly collection of the material as opposed to every other week with the dual streams. And for residents, it increases their convenience and reduces confusion. So this program will have standardized carts for each collection point. We'll receive 1 trash and 1 recycling cart. These carts, in addition to promoting hygienic refuse collection, will lead to cleaner streets because they have lids. So we no longer have to worry about wind-induced scatter. It reduces the amount of animals and other vectors that may get into them to promote that scatter. And it's just, overall, it's an easy and convenient way for residents to store their materials. So with all of that said, to implement these changes, it will require updates to Chapter 118 of the town's solid waste ordinance. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rich to provide some more details on that.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So in your packet, we provided a strike-through version of the ordinance, and we have areas that have been identified with different colors that would show new language, stricken language, and language that was modified in one way or another. The ordinance is broken into, the new ordinance is broken into 7 articles, and each one of those articles has various subsections with that. So what we did, and we didn't want to steer the council in any specific way, but there's a lot of information to go through, and I wanted to just kind of highlight some of the areas that we thought were important, and that's in your memo also. So up on the screen is really the same information that we captured in the memo, just describing the various articles and some of the changes. So if the council would like, we can go through these kind of highlights, or I can stop here and we could just answer questions. I know it's late and I know you have some other items that you still want to cover, but we can highlight these, or we can just answer questions on any specific areas that you have questions on.
I'm good with questions.
Go ahead. So you're happy with going with questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, that's good. Councilor Lund, does that work for you?
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Burton?
Yeah.
I'm just trying
Whatever
to
you're doing.
check in with everybody. We're all good? Okay, that's fine. I know
I have one question, which is just to clarify on the language in the resolution being presented. What we had already approved and voted on as a town council was acceptance of the state funds for 2 EV trucks. And the language currently listed here seems to also continue to reference grant funding for 2 EV trucks and the charging, but the plan is currently to purchase 1 and then a diesel. So does that decision have to be voted on later, that plan to make that swap? That's not happening this evening, that vote?
No, and thanks for the question. No, what the council voted on when they accepted the DRA grant was the ability to exercise an option up to 2 EV vehicles. And that's how we've kind of characterized it in pretty much any documentation that we've had with both the state and the council. And I did confirm with the DES to ensure that they were supportive of that decision. EV is a fantastic option for us, but it needs to be done with eyes open and understanding that in New England we have very cold weather, and when those temperatures get down below 30 degrees, it has a major impact on the efficiency of those batteries and those trucks. So and in that memo you probably saw there was some reference to that with some charts and also some data supporting the efficiency and the lack of performance as it gets colder. So no, there's no additional need for that. The next time you'll see us talking about trucks will be likely when we're coming back for the award of a contract to procure an EV vehicle and a diesel vehicle. Does that answer your question, Em?
Yes, thank you for that
Okay,
clarification.
thank you.
Councilor Bubar sent out a memo about definitions overall in the town in different departments, which I thought merited further attention, and wonder about the definitions that have been proposed in here. Were they checked against any other definitions in town for, say, what is a resident? Or,
Yes.
what is a property?
Yes, Councilor Bubar gave me the benefit of that question some time ago, so we were able to fine tune the ordinance to ensure that it was in alignment with definitions in the zoning ordinance, for example, and for multifamily units in particular. And so there are some of those definitions either consistent with the state of the industry or consistent with state of New Hampshire regulations in our solid waste operating plan and even beyond.
Part of my concern was actually coming from the planning boards coming out with new definitions, and the housing task force may add additional definitions, and they're reconciling with current definitions, and it just seems to be, so it wasn't as much of a complaint about the ordinance as it was, getting things synchronized is
worthwhile.
Is fun. Well, I don't know. I mean, Todd did respond to me, and I'm sympathetic to the argument that there are times it just does make sense to have the definition within the ordinance. And you can't just go with common English language, because too many times you want to say X, Y, Z, but it might take a paragraph to explain what it is in English language, and you don't want to have to do that paragraph 20 times in an ordinance. So I'm a fan of dictionaries. I mean, I have a bias, but I mean, I appreciate the challenges that it presents to a town. So I don't know that there is an answer. Or I don't know that there is middle ground even. I don't know.
So may I make a quick comment?
Yes, please.
So we were sensitive to that issue, and we do have a preamble in the definition section. It's 118-4, and it talks about the following definitions shall apply in the interpretation and enforcement of this chapter unless otherwise expressly stated. The following terms shall, for the purpose of this chapter, have the meanings indicated in this section. Words used in the present tense include the future, the singular number includes the plural, and plural the singular. Talk about confusing. Where terms are not defined in the article, they shall have their ordinary accepted meanings or such as the context may imply. And then it gets into what shall and mandatory and may and things like that. So there is, you know, an interpretation of dictionary language of certain words that we have
That's the same preamble the planning board used.
Yeah.
So I think that,
But it still concerns me that casual observers will get lost in the shuffle.
Question?
Yes.
For those of us who get our socialization on Tuesday and Saturday mornings at the center, we can still deliver our own trash under this?
For certain, yes.
What about the compost? That'll continue? as well?
Compost will continue. We're looking to improve that potentially in the future. That's been a big part of a conversation with IMAC, but for the time being, we'll still have the containers for food waste composting, as well as yard waste we'll be able to.
By the way, I
drop
think
off.
you could start the covered containers anytime. I mean,
Exactly.
that would be really helpful to have.
Right, we're in agreement with you.
yeah, there's nothing worse than walking down the road and seeing the crows on top of the plastic bag, and you're just like, oh, no.
I have to admit, I took great delight early one morning watching a mother raccoon collect her 3 cubs and say, "Come here, watch this." She jumps up, pushes the garbage pail over, the lid goes flying, and then she just says, "Come on, it's dinner time."
That would be worth it.
Hilarious. But I
Hopefully
understand
these
the
ones are
problem it
heftier.
causes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got 2 quick questions, Rich. One, will there be any additional costs to the end users?
In certain cases, there would be, based on additional trash that they may generate in a unique situation, and that would be the 6-month barrel sticker. So everyone will get one 96-gallon container and another container for trash.
Sure.
And those are built into our program cost as they are today. If someone has a unique circumstance and they'd like to purchase an additional container and purchase a barrel sticker for the disposal costs, there would be a cost, but that's, you know, completely something that they would choose to do.
So the town is going to issue a complete pair to each resident in regards to the automated,
Yes, sir.
okay. And then if they have an overflow desire, they can go and purchase a separate container to keep permanently with an additional cost per that.
Or travel to the transfer station at no cost
Okay.
to be able to dispose of it like they would today.
Roger. And then the last question I have is, will the trash days remain the same for the households?
We are working through those right now with some efficiencies of these automated collection vehicles. We will probably have to refine those to some degree, but we will we'll be looking at that just to balance the routes. And we haven't got there yet, but we've got initially there, and we know that we could probably reach and notice for people when they do change.
Okay, I want to give you some pats on the back here because I really love this brief, and I greatly enjoy. I've sat in on a couple of confirmation briefs / requests that you have briefed, as well as the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. And I greatly enjoy your articulation, your concise language, and that you get us answers in a digestible and time efficient manner. So
Great.
thank you very much. I love that you track data points like cycle time. The efficiencies on that is huge. I am a generator of a large amount of trash. I get the nice professional notes every once in a while from your transfer station staff, respectfully requesting me to deliver that one to the dump myself next time. And I want to tell you that I'm in support of this ordinance. Anything that improves the efficiency of the town, helps the environment, and reduces costs as well as the risk to our workers, I think is definitely a good initiative.
Great. Thank
Side
you.
note, I really enjoy the professionalism of the transfer station staff. Tom gave me a brief tour before one of his Tuesday sessions. He gave me a nice, answered my questions directly. He told me, I asked him what sucked, and he told me what sucked, and I asked him what was good, and he told me what was good. I didn't know that the recycling was such a big deal in regards to the exposure of organics as well as the wrong type of materials that we're making it into the commingles and how
Right.
much that costs us,
Right.
as well as the paper, recycled cardboard versus that like finer fiber paper that makes it into the cardboard that ends up potentially, like he was telling me like a couple years ago, we ended up paying someone to take it as opposed to getting money back because of the impact. So I greatly appreciate the way he leads and how his team responds, as well as how he interacts with myself and the other counselors, especially the soft shop. So thank you very much, guys.
Well, thank you, Curtis. And
Appreciate that.
I will just note that there'll be significant improvements at the transfer station in the near term as well. The council also approved capital funding for the placement of compactors for both single stream as well as solid waste. And by doing that, the single stream and solid waste will be able to efficiently transport that material up to the landfill on a much less frequent basis, probably cut back trips by 2/3, which is a major recyclables. There's a lot of air transport, no matter how much you compact it. A compactor will do wonders to be able to compact that and transport it more efficiently. So you'll see those changes in the near term as well.
Awesome. He was also telling me how important the cover of that was because of the
paying for
keeping
water.
the animals and stuff out as well as the water for the waste.
I was really surprised about the water. It was an aha moment for
Oh,
me.
yeah.
Like, well, yeah, of course, but
Same
you
with
don't think
solid
about it.
waste.
Yeah.
The solid waste, when it snows, those are open top containers, it melts and you're going over the scale with water.
Environment.
The
It's
efficiencies
also
are
a good
amazing.
reason to compost, because vegetative waste is what, about 80% water?
Yeah.
I was going to say too, that I appreciate the level of detail that's in here, because I certainly, from being on IMAC and listening to efficiently and with an appreciation for what the staff who are collecting have to experience.
Yeah, we have a great staff, we're very lucky.
I'm not sure if you have our pink sheets or not, but on page 8, there is the comment about expansion of collection to 5 days a week, returning to the transfer station to recharge as needed, and disposing of materials the following day with a full charge. That sounds like you're going to be keeping stuff in the truck at DPW overnight, and does that cause a pest issue?
So, no, it's all self-contained, within that container, which is, that's a closed-top container essentially. I'm not familiar with the pink sheet, but I understand what you just said. I think it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, isn't it?
Okay.
So pink would make sense. The makes sense. The reason that we would do that is with an EV vehicle, if we were to get to a point where the operator could not make it to the transfer station, to the landfill.
I understood
and
that.
back.
I was just asking about
Vectors
about
and,
the pests, insects, and what implications that might have at DPW.
it's not an issue. It's not an issue at all.
Good.
I also want to say thank you for, the information that was provided. It really addressed all the different questions. I think I could come up with one, except for one, of course, there's always one, which is, I saw that you highlighted that 93% of all residences could be adequately served with the 64-gallon bins. Is there a significant price difference between the 64 and the 96-gallon? Because if almost all the households can be served by that 64-gallon and there is a significant price savings, I'd like to know more about that and maybe think about maybe looking at the 64-gallon.
At the big picture, it's single dollars, not tens or hundreds of dollars per bin. What we're trying to do is have a standardized cart for solid waste, which will incentivize recycling and composting. We've done significant calculations on both the audits that we've done, but also just EPA and industry standards of how much trash is generated per capita, per individual, and looking at that information to right-size that bin. So I think the 64 is appropriate. Many of the communities that have converted to standardized carts and automated collection are very successful with 64-gallon bins. The 96 is also appropriate for recycling. We see a lot of people with, cardboard and boxes and things like that, which will be a lot easier to handle with the larger 96-gallon container. And then we also will have accommodations for people who believe a 96 or 64-gallon bin will be unwieldy, and and a person who might not be generating very much trash at all, and finds it hard to handle, we'll have an accommodation for that with possibly a smaller bin. I think the default bins will be 96 and 64 with potentially an opt-out if there's a special circumstance that warrants. We don't want to get into a situation where people are opting out and then finding later that they need a larger bin, because that would be a purchase that we made that we will not get our funding back from the vendor. So we think that those are the sizes that we would move forward with. Now, some communities, and we are looking into this, some communities are purchasing 64-gallon bins for both solid waste and recycling, same color, and having a different color top for either recycling or solid waste. And that way you're cutting your inventory of bins in half, and you're having different color container tops, which are a lot easier to store. So we are contemplating that also. We're going to do a little bit more research before we make that decision. But those are just some things that I hope are responsive to your question.
Absolutely, thank you. So well thought out.
Thanks.
Can these bins be stored outside, or do you recommend storing them in a shed or inside?
Do you mean when we're storing large quantities, or yourself?
When the residents
they can
have
be stored.
These two bins, can they be stored outside?
They can be stored outside without a problem. And we do have some, screening requirements in the ordinance, and that's been in there even from the last ordinance, but they can't, from a weather standpoint.
I guess two questions. One is, the goal is to help incentivize recycling through a volume-based program.
Right.
So if we find that there are residents who are ignoring the size of the bin, and they continue to put their free bags out, or their plastic bags out around the bin we issue, how will we address those people? That's the first question. And the second is, to the extent this creates new efficiencies, and if it's quite successful, is there an opportunity to move resources to allow that to take place as well, which is something that Integrated Waste Management Committee has been interested in for a while, but we haven't been able to make it cost out.
Right.
Yeah.
I think to answer your first question, I think there's going to be an educational component of this, and there's going to be a learning curve. So I would imagine that there's going to be, the first couple weeks of the program, we'll see some bags outside the barrels, and we'll have to tag them. And our operators will be instructed to pick them up, tag them for the first week, possibly the second week. But over time, to gain the efficiencies that we're trying to gain from this program, we will have to leave those bags behind, tagged, and give them other options, such as the transfer station to bring those materials up to on Tuesdays and Saturdays. We're also contemplating, and I'm probably foolish for saying this publicly on TV, but we are also looking at some of the redeployment of our resources may give us an opportunity to keep the transfer station open for an additional day during the week. So that might also provide some benefit as the whole program is concerned. For the composting, food waste composting program, I know that's an interest for IMAC. I think we've said this is a major undertaking, this program that we're implementing and putting in place right now, and we haven't tried to do so there may be an opportunity. I don't want it to, anything could be on the table. There's obviously costs associated with the equipment, the processing, and then the marketing of that material if we were looking to sell that, either give it away locally or potentially on the market. So I don't want to say no, but we really haven't explored it in any depth at this point.
I have one follow-on question based off of that answer. For the remaining or leaving excess bags, this is just an item of concern, and I'm taking the risk of thinking in live action. But if we do choose to leave bags, and it is a large amount of bags, we are asking for the town to potentially get the raccoons and stuff to start spreading stuff all over town and have a bad look, especially as the residents see it for the first time in action and start to be upset by the increased visibility of trash if they left it out and it got tore up. I don't know what the mechanism should be, whether it's a type of grab and write a note, say, hey, this is your last chance, and then get tagged, or if we have some type of citation writing process, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly what, I'm sorry if I cut you off, Curtis.
Yeah, no.
So it's exactly what you described. We have a courtesy notice would be the first.
Sure.
And then there would be a notice of noncompliance, and if it continued, we would know at first it's probably just an issue of us educating the resident. If it became a problem, we would have a conversation directly with them. And it does occur on occasion.
Sure.
Even nowadays, somebody puts out a stop, a late stop, and we've already been through. It stays out until the next day. In many cases, we will run back and grab that the next day,
Sure.
but it is out overnight.
Understood.
So it's an issue we contend with right now, and it's not prolific. We don't have a big problem with that, but it's something that we deal with on a case by case.
Sure. And if I misunderstood, I thought I heard that we were going to tag him.
Okay.
Yes.
And just one last thing, and this has been touched upon in the communication and in the conversation, but it's important, I think, to emphasize, we often talk about our public safety folks as being police and fire and the difficult jobs that they have and the dangerous jobs that they have. But the task of collecting trash, moving hundreds upon hundreds of bags in extreme temperatures, the heat of the summer, the cold in the winter, the smell, the stench, the conditions, the danger of getting poked or cut and handling these bags, or physically hurting yourself lifting these bags, is really substantial, and the staff do a terrific job. But this innovation really will serve to help keep staff safer and make that job much easier to do. So I think this is a big step in terms of supporting our hardworking staff at Public
It
Works.
reduces the risk of workers' comp.
It does.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. They do a great job.
They do.
Councilor Burton?
Have you heard anything more about what we're going to do when Turnkey closes in 4 or 5 years and we have no place to bring trash?
I don't think it's 4 or 5 years. I think they were able to get an expansion, and they are continuing to look at future expansions. We're in a contract with them right now that goes until December of 2025. There's an option for renewal of another 5-year contract in our current contract, so we'll be evaluating that through 2025. But they have
North, and they haven't been able to do that yet. So.
Last conversation I had with Pete, our representative, is they still had capacity on site to accommodate our needs. So we're going to get into that conversation in more detail with them probably in the next 6 months.
Yeah. Our contract with Waste Management ends this coming year, so we need to renegotiate that.
I do have a bit of a concern with your statement that it would be safe to leave these containers outside. I don't know if you are aware that there have been multiple bear sightings in the Foss Farm Conservation Complex, and occasionally these bears have been known to venture into the faculty neighborhood. Are these containers really bear-proof?
They're certainly not bear-proof. I don't think, unless you have containers, so these have tops, they do seal, but you're always prone to, bears and other vectors that might get in there.
Okay, yeah. I'm one of those people who sets an alarm specifically for the morning of my trash pickup so that I'm not leaving trash on the curb overnight, because there have been bear sightings within half a mile of my house, and I don't want anything to happen in Durham, anything remotely like what happened in Grafton.
Okay.
I would say that encourages a homeowner to compost, because then your garbage, your trash
Doesn't
can is
happen.
not going to attract bears or other vectors.
Well, except for the meeting.
Since you're on record suggesting you're going to look at opening for 3 days a week, I would hope, though, that you coordinate that with the swap shop people, because I can't imagine a third day with a swap shop not open.
We talked about that, and
Okay.
I think that there's many, in the winter time, the swap shop is not open.
Right.
So we'll work with them to make sure that it works with their schedules too.
Work with them to make sure they get heat for the winter.
I don't know.
We don't do
It-
it.
You
It's
just
a
know they'll
popular
sneak stuff in
destination.
no matter what. You just gotta guard it.
Anything else? All right, in that case, I will read
Okay.
the motion.
I would
Unless you-
move that,
Okay, yes, please.
I would move that we approve,
The motion is on the back of the pink paper, last page, go to the last page, bottom of the last, all the way to the back.
Page 12 of the
Bottom.
communication.
yeah, I would move that the Durham Town Council hereby approve on first reading plans to accommodate planned solid waste program changes and schedule a public hearing for November 4th of 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Counselor Lund, second. All right, any more discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote, and we'll start with
Heather Grant, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
Sally Nadell, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Curtis Register, aye.
F. Friedrichs, aye.
All right,
All
it's
right,
unanimous.
thank you.
Thank you,
We
gentlemen.
will see you on the 4th.
Yes.
Have a good evening, gentlemen.
Approval of minutes. Anybody have a significant adjustment to the minutes?
Yeah, I had only minor changes.
Yep, I did too, that I sent in, so.
Well done. Well done.
So I guess we can compliment our minute taker.
Taking time, already.
Very nice.
Yes.
Great.
Okay. In that case, I move that we accept the minutes as written, or slightly corrected, for September 9th, 2024. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Councilor Lund. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Do we
All
need to
those
do roll
opposed?
call?
Oh, that's right, 'cause
Right.
that was on there, so roll call. Thank you for the
Start
reminder.
with Curtis.
Yes, we're gonna start on this.
Or
side.
Heather's
Curtis
always-
Register, aye.
Now you can vote.
Darrell Ford, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Sally Nadell, aye.
James Bubar, aye.
I, well, then you
We
get
might need to start at the
confused.
top, I don't know.
That's my standard operating daily.
Let's do it
Never
alphabetical.
confused.
All right, so it's time for our roundtable. So anyone like to be first? You can start anywhere. All right, I'll go first. We'll start in the middle. Let's see, the Human Rights Commission meets tomorrow in this room from 3:30 to 5. We may go a little beyond 5, but with everybody's schedules, that seemed to be the best fit. So between 3:30 and 5 here tomorrow for human rights. And this discussion of the role of politics, that's boards, commissions, and committees in water resource management or any environmental resource management. It was fascinating. Curtis and Em, I believe, are part of all 4 sessions. I was just attending this one last week. It was great to see so many enthusiastic people there that come from different walks of life that want to participate in supporting and promoting our water resources.
I just want to clarify that Councilor, or Chair Nadell was a presenter, and Councilor Register and I we are just participants, so. Kudos to
That was
you.
just, she was just saying, I was actually there as a presenter. That's why I was there for just the one session. I actually sat with Bart McDonough, who used to be our head of Conservation Commission, and with Ellen Snyder, who used to be our land stewardship coordinator. We were on the panel together. So it was fun to see familiar faces and catch up with them. All right, that's my report.
Evening, one application for a short-term rental and another application for a lot line adjustment. There was an IMAC committee meeting on October 2nd. We did talk about the composting challenge that's currently going on. And I don't remember when it's going to conclude. I think it's in November. But people are enthusiastic, I think, about how it started and the number of participants. We did have discussions about other communities that have curbside composting, but they're bigger communities and they tend to be in Massachusetts where the state is substantially funding them. And so they didn't really seem practical for us to get too deep into what they're doing, other than the way they've constructed the program is interesting and could be useful to us in the future. And then there was a much longer discussion about single-use plastic in the town and what, if anything, IMAC should be proceeding with saying about it. And that's all I have.
All right, who's next?
I can go.
All right, thank
Well,
you.
of course, I wasn't here for M notes because I looked at it today, but the Housing Task Force met on September 9th, which I was also not able to attend because I was at Boston Airport. But the summary is, you know, obviously they're still talking a lot about the presentation that was given to the board, so there was some discussion on that. Just so there's general openness about the cottage clusters, and duplexes, so there's positives, and of course there's also concerns depending on, you know, the attendees of the different committees. So they just had an update on all of the inputs that were provided up to that point. So some of the things are, you know, concern about making sure we're talking about conservation when we're looking at the different, you know, any housing development. Wildlife corridors were brought up and whether they should have more information on, you know, where those are between the areas of conservation and wildlife corridors. Also as an update on the workforce housing ordinance from where it was at that time. Also a discussion about putting together a group on the housing downtown and, you know, getting some investigation going on that now in April. I have some, do you have the planning board stuff, Em, or?
I have some, but I have not been at the.
Yeah, I know you haven't been there either. I was just wondering if you would, because I have.
So if you want to start with those, that would be fantastic.
I don't have a lot here, but, so the planning board met on September 11th and 9/25, since the last two that I have updates on. 9/11 was taken up, I would think, for a significant amount on the capital improvement presentation and discussion with Todd and the different leadership of Durham. And then on the 20th, let's see what else. Oh, and then they did have some review of, again, the workforce housing overlay, because things were still in communication there. And then on the 25th, I had a review of a subdivision on Durham Point, where it's coming up for public comments, I believe, at our next meeting. If not, maybe it's the one after that, where 280 Durham Point Road is going to subdivide and have an existing house with a 5-acre lot and then put into conservation 28 acres. Still the sort of finalized workforce housing set up for a public hearing, and then we were talking a little bit about zoning definitions as well. And the next meeting is October 9th. That's it. That's all I have.
I have a question for you. I did a drive-through in the Sophie Road.
Did you go look at that one?
And
Yeah.
is it all rentals? Is it
It's a mix.
It's a mix.
Yeah.
So many of those houses.
The homes are for sale.
Single stand. And are those workforce housing controlled, or, I mean, in terms of
So,
Or is it some privately owned?
yeah, I think those
Not
are.
all rentals?
Yeah, I think there were, several of those are at market rate.
Okay,
And then as you go up to the end,
yes,
there's the sort of condo,
yeah.
unit, yeah, it's the mix.
I had a question, just to be clear, on the New Hampshire Supreme Court's ruling on the Garish property in favor of the Planning Commission and what they did. Or is the Planning Commission all done? That project is approved?
Yeah, we don't have, there's
and they
no
can go
action
forward
on,
if they want?
on our part, unless they would do a change on the design.
It's not good to see the planning board upheld in their decision after all this time.
The majority of the planning board was upheld.
Yeah, he voted no for it.
It was not unanimous.
Which is, you know,
Yeah,
it
that's
passed,
good.
but he,
Yeah.
at the time was, anyway, yes, that was interesting news anyway, that something got through the state of New Hampshire.
All right, next volunteer.
Land Stewardship Committee?
All right.
Add to what Councilor Grant said and say that, just to clarify that on Wednesday of this week, October 9th, is the public hearing for the updated workforce housing overlay district, but also for the definitions, so for both.
Both of them?
This
Okay,
Wednesday.
yeah, I haven't looked at the agenda yet.
No?
Yes, Councilor Ford.
Land Stewardship Subcommittee. The next meeting is this Wednesday at 8:30 in the morning, right here in this room. At our last meeting, we voted to recommend to the Conservation Commission building of a bridge on the Long Marsh Trail, which I understand from Councilor Bubar will now be funded by the Municipal Transportation Improvement Fee, which is great.
It's an idea.
Might actually get me out onto a trail.
We discussed a request from Anton Beckerman from UNH. They're looking for a 5-acre plot to do some experimental agriculture, and we suggested 3 potential places, understanding that the town would have to look at whether that is allowed on these parcels, Thompson Forest, Oyster River Forest, and Wagon Hill Farm. Sarah, as you know, Sarah Callahan has left, is no longer the land stewardship coordinator, but we did vote to recommend to the Conservation Commission that she be appointed as an alternate member. That hasn't come before us yet, but I assume it will.
October 1st, we had a discussion with the current UNH Sustainability Fellow, Sophie Goodwin, about the electric vehicle survey results, and also starting to update our climate action plan. It is my understanding that Ms. Goodwin will be appearing at a future town council meeting to discuss the climate action plan. We had a discussion, a brief discussion about further Friday updates from the Energy Committee. We forwarded the 2 resolutions that were discussed earlier tonight regarding the car registration fee and also the buses, bikes, and brooms resolution. We had an update on the CPCNH Seacoast Challenge. There was discussion of making an infrared camera available for public use for energy audits. This is to see where heat would be escaping from your house. There was a mention with CPC and H is because they don't have a mechanism for giving you credit if you produce more electricity in a given month than you consume. But this particular member, despite having solar panels on his house, is a net consumer of electricity even in June and July. So for him, there is no issue. So anyone else with solar panels who is never producing more than they consume can consider switching to CPCNH. Okay. On the on the was Rosh Hashanah.
A suggestion, possibly, if Energy wants to pursue the idea of having those heat detector, like guns or whatever, whatever
Right.
it might be.
IR camera.
Yeah, is that, the library is looking for ways to support the community with specific items that one can check out, like a book, and then return. So just a thought that for Energy, if you want to do this, you might consider working through the library
Okay,
as a way
it's-
to promote usage and let them manage the borrowing.
Okay, either Councilor Friedrichs or I will forward this recommendation to the Energy Committee.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think it might appeal to a lot. Councilor Burton, you ready?
I'm ready. I wanted to say that in my 47 years of attending meetings in this town as part of government, the one I attended with the Conservation Commission the other day, a couple of weeks ago, was one of the best. Aaron Hardy Hale chaired the meeting because Dwight wasn't there. But we've had this ongoing conversation about the tidal buffers and what they should be, and the Conservation Commission had unanimously voted 330 feet, which is about the length of a Canadian football field. I figure if you can envision that. And so the meeting before that, we had quite heated exchanges, not heated, but emotional exchange about how this would fly, because it seems to be that is the best conservation that would be, as you said. And but at the next meeting, I have to give a lot of credit to Michael Barron, because he thought about this between the two meetings, and he came in with 3 conditions under which the 330 could be waived, and the whole council agreed to it, including Dwight, who came in by phone. And it was really nice the way that all came together, and a group of people who knew that the next part of the process, which is going to the planning board, we needed to give them something realistic to work with. And that's what has happened now. And that the fact that Michael was able to thread the needle and put together 3 conditions under which that 330 could be waived by special exception is what you're going to get on the planning board now. And it still has to go through the gauntlet. But I think the work the Conservation Commission did over a whole year, I think, of working with this has now resulted in what we believe is a decent proposal to go forward. And it was really gratifying to see that happen.
Yeah, a question. Would a special exception not go through ZBA rather than the planning board?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it would,
They'll be happy
but
about
the policy itself goes to the planning board, right? I think, this...
Correct.
The
It
ordinance.
goes to the planning board, but then if whoever would submit for it would go to the zoning.
Yeah, and if it's
Okay.
passed, then that would be the process, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Was there consideration that this would at all be considered a taking of property under,
Not any more than it is now.
even if the line was extended from where it is now, which is is it at 100 feet now? Is it at 200 feet now?
120, no,
150.
it's 125, isn't it, on tidal property? On tidal water.
Yeah,
But it could be
125
50.
on tidal rivers. It's currently 75 feet on streams like College Brook and I believe also Petty Brook.
So 330 feet is significantly further than
Right,
75 feet.
It's
I was not present, but my suspicion is that the provision of these special exception mechanisms is a way to avoid it being a taking. Is presumably, if you have an existing property that would be grandfathered.
Find the extended length of the tidal buffer with the workforce overlay, you wouldn't be able to put anything because it covers both. Because, for example, the Keep property has a creek that goes through it, which is tidal, and that would be subject to the buffer.
660
But yet, there's hope. It's also now in the overlay district, the workforce overlay district, that same piece of property. So, but I think anyway, I think it can be worked around. And
My limited experience also says that special exceptions are rarely denied.
well, probably because people don't bring them in if they
Because
know,
of the
but
way
that's- yeah.
the regulations are written.
But I think I'm really going to be interested in what the planning board does with this, because it took a lot of time and a lot of work, and I think it balances well conservation. You okay, Tom?
Yeah, I just bumped my.
So remaining reports need to be concise. I'm looking at 9 minutes here of time, unless we want to extend. So are you ready?
Try to be very concise.
Yep.
Department of Parks and Recreation met, and first of all, excuse me, there was a walk at the Oyster River Forest on Sunday. It was the second walk in conjunction with the Land Stewardship Committee and seems to be quite successful. And the next one is coming up on November 18th, a Sunday. The Stewart,
November-
Stevens Woods, excuse me.
Yeah, would that be November 17th? Because November 18th is a Monday.
Then it would be the 17th. Thank you. The Parks and Rec heard a report from the Housing Task Force and had some discussion around that. Also, a lengthy discussion facility or not. Their next meeting is on October 22nd. The Seacoast Economic Development stakeholders met and got a presentation from the New England On-Site Energy Technical Assistance Partnership and from the Clean Energy New Hampshire Technical Assistance and Business Grants, which I can forward along to the Energy Committee if they haven't seen it already. Their next meeting is on October 22nd. And today I was able to attend a meeting of New Hampshire Business and Economic Affairs, had a session over what they call it the Seacoast. It was in Exeter to present what the BEA in New Hampshire has for communities and individuals in this area.
Oh, very concise.
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting to 10:45 hours.
Is there a second? Well, let me just check with the administrator. How much do you need to share with us tonight?
I've got 20 items.
Okay, so.
I'll be fast.
I'll second that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All in?
Remy's upset.
All those in favor of going till 10:45, raise your hand.
No.
Emily's,
Oh, we have to say aye.
Oh, I've got to do, okay, sorry. Can't raise your hand.
Heather Grant, aye.
James Boobar, aye.
Cy Nadell, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
I respect your principle, sir. Curtis Register, aye. Thank you.
And Remy
All
says
right.
no as well.
Wait a minute, we're not done.
Did we hear from Councilor Friedrichs? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, M. Friedrichs, aye.
Okay. I would still encourage everyone to be concise. All right. So, who do we still have to hear?
Myself and M.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Okay.
You ready?
So for the Agricultural Commission, they have not met since the last time we met. Their next one will be in here October 21st, same time. For Oyster River Schools, they met October 1st, but you already heard most of that. Their next meeting is, I did want to reiterate that he's talked about the community conversations, 7 p.m., 8 October tomorrow at Oyster River High School, and then the next one, October 28th. Their next meeting is October 21st for the school board at Mastway Cafeteria. I wanted to, commend Energy Committee for the Maine's Electric Campaign Program's advertisement. I actually got them to do sign up for me to get a lithium-ion batteries as well as an additional 12 panels if we get enough sign-ups within the Seacoast region with a 15% rebate. Those individuals have put everything on hold, however, because they've gone down to North Carolina to help with the Hurricane Helene power restoration stuff. So I really appreciate that they have a service mindset as well. I'd also like to throw my name in the hat, if appropriate, for the SPRC of vacancy for the seat. And then finally, I have a personal statement on our macabre anniversary here. So obviously on this day 1 year ago, Hamas perpetrated an atrocious and brutal attack on innocents, a truly horrifying atrocity. Likewise, members of the Israeli government and military have taken to retribution killings of innocent Palestinians, as well as more than a few international humanitarian aid workers and journalists. This entire conflict is still being thoroughly investigated by several prestigious global judicial and investigatory bodies. Just as the country of Israel has the right to self-defense, Palestinians have a right to be protected from genocide acts. We have residents in Durham that have direct and indirect heritage to both Israel and Gaza. Both have innate rights to safety and freedom of speech, just as all residents of this town, all citizens and guests of this country. The Resolution 24, Tax 17, has nothing to do with foreign policy. It has no assignment of blame for this conflict. I am exceedingly proud that with some known opposition, this town had the courage and chose to speak out in support of public safety and First Amendment rights. That's all I have to say.
Councilor Friedrich, do you have anything to share with us tonight?
I don't have anything to say after that, and what was already covered in terms of the planning board.
Thank you. That's everyone, so.
All right, so buckle up, here we go. So we're working hard on the development of the fiscal year 2025 budget. And so we've got about 2 weeks left for Gail and myself to make changes and batch everything up and get it to the printer. And then we'll present it to the council for the first meeting in November. So you can look forward to receiving it in a little less than a month. Been spending quite a bit of time reviewing the updated rewrite of the Dish and T-Mobile Communications co-location agreements for the Foss Farm water tank and for the monopole at the transfer station. So eventually, one day, I hope to bring you proposals on both, but it just keeps going. We're in the final phase of the 2023 audit, and our hope is to bring the auditors to the council in the next month or so. It'll depend upon the auditor's schedule, but we're almost there. I've got a draft on my desk to look at as of today, which is positive. Gail Jablonski, our business manager, will be here for the council meeting on October 21st for the quarterly financial report. I am pleased to note, after months and months of conversation, we reached today a tentative agreement with our Durham Police Officers Union on a successor bargaining agreement. And so on the 21st at 6 p.m., we're planning to have Joe McKittrick come to meet with the council and our bargaining team in a non-meeting setting to talk about the particulars of the agreement. And then if the council is so inclined, act on the tentative agreement that evening. So, but that's positive news that we've come this far. Sophie Goodwin, our UNH Sustainability Fellows, in the process of updating the Climate Action Plan. We're working on the various bullet item statements that will be the objectives over the next 5-year period. And that's what will bring the council for some initial conversation, probably the beginning of November. I had an opportunity to meet for a couple of hours with the UNH architect and planner Ken Weston regarding the UNH master plan process, a lot of feedback the town has provided to them. In addition, we talked about the edge at West End and the planned use development ordinance the planning board and the town will need to adopt in order for that project to go forward, because there'll be private development out there. So it was a very productive conversation. UNH is planning to have some public forums to get public feedback both on campus and for the Durham community on the most recent update of the master plan. And so we're working with Ken Weston on how to best organize that to make sure the public in Durham knows they can come and provide feedback. So that will be important. Had a great meeting today at Riverwoods, Durham, concerning Riverwoods' interest in moving forward with a potential phase 2 expansion. Essentially across Stone Quarry Drive, there's a lot of land there, and Riverwoods has some interest in moving forward with some development in that location. So more to come, but it was a promising conversation. There's a legislative committee that was set up that is looking at the definition of student housing, and in alignment with that, a few of us on the town side have been spending some time talking about definition of family for Durham, whether we should have one or not, whether it should be updated to reflect a more modern definition and reality of family setting. And then in addition, the current no more than 3 unrelated zoning provisions we have in place in town. And if you recall, there was a significant effort in the last legislative session to negate zoning at the local level, such as what Durham has. And so we'd like to position Durham in a strong place if that were to occur again. So that conversation's ongoing. Different perspectives on how to proceed. As part of our process in reviewing and updating sealed non-public minutes, the next year batch to look at is 2006, and we're going to start that soon. Let me just see. We also have begun work in the administrator's office, Karen Edwards in particular, on the 2024 annual report process. And we're taking some of the design work in-house. Karen has really stepped up and is going to handle a lot of that design herself, and that will reduce some of our costs. So kudos to Karen. It's really great. Moderator Chris Regan will be with us at the next council meeting to talk about new voting machines for next year. And as part of that, the council, if the council is comfortable, will have to vote to authorize us to move forward with a specific type of machine that will use updated technology for next year. I've updated the council by email, but just publicly in the interest of transparency, because the town, as part of the proposed budget, because the fire department has recommended adding 4 new positions, that would be a lieutenant rank, that would be a new rank that we have not had at the Durham Fire Department. The Durham Firefighters Association filed a request with the New Hampshire Public Employees Labor Relations Board to include that position as part of the firefighters collective bargaining unit. However, the town and the Durham Professional Municipal Managers Association, which represents the town's captains, previously 2 contracts ago had already included that position as part of the middle managers unit. The firefighters believe it should be with the firefighters, not with the middle managers, and subsequently the middle managers filed an action with the PLRB to modify their formal filing to include that lieutenant position, and the town has filed in support of the middle manager's position. We feel that's a better location for those that new classification of employee. I will note there is no guarantee whatsoever, and I repeat, no guarantee at all, that any of those new positions will be included in the proposed 2025 budget, but that does not mean we're not spending a lot of time talking about where these positions should be if hypothetically they were one day created.
May I ask a 5-second synopsis of what that means? Why is that significant that they're fighting over it so significantly?
Well, there are 2 reasons why that new position might be important. One is, if the town of Durham and the town of Madbury have started to have some conversations around whether it would be feasible for Durham to provide fire coverage for Madbury.
I apologize. I asked the question wrong. I meant between the Middle Managers Association and the Firefighters Association. Why are they fighting over that title?
It's not over the title. It's which bargaining unit that position should be included within. And so the middle manager's unit is a very small unit of employees that include just a handful of people, like 10 or fewer, I believe. And so for the middle manager's unit, including potentially 4 additional people as part of that unit would be significant. It would add to their numbers, help to spread out the cost of the attorney and the cost of being part of a
So
collective
they
bargaining
retain a
unit.
separate cost for their attorney?
They do, that unit does. In addition, if the position was part of the middle manager's unit, then that lieutenant position would potentially be able to fill in for captains and help offset overtime on a more regular basis for captains. And remember, there are 4 captains, 16 firefighters. So when a captain's out, only a captain can fill a captain position. So from a town position as well, we'd love to be able to have the lieutenants right in that captain's unit. The firefighters, I think, feel that there's strength in numbers. They feel that it would be beneficial for some of those same reasons to have those positions in their unit. And in addition, the firefighters argue there's more of a community of interest within the firefighters unit for those lieutenants versus in the middle managers unit. Sure. So that's, we're having a dispute amongst colleagues, friends.
Sure.
We all respect each other, but have different point of view.
Thank you for that explanation.
Okay. But if Durham and Madbury were to collaborate, it would be helpful to have a lieutenant who had some supervisory authority at a Madbury substation, directing what's occurring from that station.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful. Okay. Let me just see. I'm sorry. Different topic. Had a positive conversation. We've had several, but one recently where the Durham Police Chief, Rainey Kelly, and I met with the UNH Police Chief and President Chilton and some of her staff regarding policing. And in particular, we talked through some of the points in the council resolution dealing with de-escalation and how important that is in terms of our police response to protests. So I believe UNH has that message loud and clear. UNH Police, President Chilton and her staff are really talking about that and trying, I believe, to find ways to integrate that into working with protesters in this kind of challenging setting around this issue of Israel, Palestine, Gaza, but also any other issue that might come up on campus. So I thought, again, positive signal, positive sign. This evening, the UNH Student Senate representative mentioned she believed protesting went smoothly on campus. So I followed up with the police department while we were in our meeting to find out what they knew, because I didn't have any feedback over the course of the day. And so there were some protesters outside of T Hall. There may have been others inside somewhere, I'm not sure, but everything was peaceful. There were no issues at all. So that's the extent of my knowledge.
Rain will do that.
At our next council meeting, Carolyn Singer will be present to talk about improvements to the farmhouse and and potentially barn at Wagon Hill Farm in conjunction with the LCHIP program, and that will have some budget implications. Essentially, we've got sort of 3 paths we could take: the low cost, medium cost, and high cost approach. And Carolyn will cover them and offer her perspective. So that will be helpful, I think, for the council to consider as we move into the budget process. Let me just see. In terms of the land stewardship coordinator position, we do have an opening, as was noted earlier. And we've been working with Sarah Callahan on a formal job description to put out on the stump to see if we can find people who are interested, and that's now gone out. In addition, we have at least one individual who has some good background who's expressed a lot of interest in the position and has met with Sarah, with Ann Welch, and now with me, and has actually also been volunteering out on some work days. So that's a positive signal as well. So we'll see how that plays out. Also, in terms of UNH, I got a really positive call from Steve Eisenhower, who's the UNH lands manager. And we work a lot with Steve on partnerships where Durham trails cross university land to get to other Durham parcels or vice versa. And Steve was just calling to let me know that he heard Sarah was leaving, and if there was any way he could be of service to Durham, just to let him know. So that, again, good partnership. In terms of planning efforts with the Oyster River Cooperative School District, one thing that didn't come up this evening, but which we're talking about is there's an interest in doing not only a tabletop later this year, early next year, where we do an emergency management kind of simulation around it. And department's interested in moving in that direction, as is the school. So that's, again, very positive. And then I had two questions. One was Councilor Grant had mentioned taking the goals update and putting it on maybe the next agenda and having a conversation around it. And I just wanted to make sure that's what you were suggesting. So we can talk about it. And then other follow-up, Councilor Burton mentioned the timing of the public comments period and the council roundtable. And so I didn't know if you were suggesting you would prefer we move the council roundtable back to toward the start of the meeting?
I was being snarky.
Oh, okay. The reason we moved the council roundtable to the end of the agenda was so that if we had presentation people here, they wouldn't have to sit through the lengthy
Well, we
roundtable.
could do that on a case-by-case basis.
It's true.
Because a lot of good information comes out around the roundtable when people are here and watching in the beginning. The reason we changed it was because of what you said. Now, we haven't had, that's all. I'm not going to fight it. I was just being a wise guy. Because I voted against it when we did it.
Do I have time to make a 30-second comment?
Yes.
Okay, so tangent off of that in regards to tactics for controlling unreasonable behavior. It's just a question that's come up in my head as to how we have individuals that sometimes get a little exacerbated, either whether it's peanut gallery from the crowd on the decision that we're making or public comments, what have you. As far as I understand it, and Todd, you correct me, I've looked at a couple of city governance individuals and how they've handled certain instances. And one town, the Springfield, Ohio town, was able or chose to recess and change the order of operations for public comments whenever they had a white nationalist address the town council or their city council, and that was threatening the town. And so the legal way they did that without involving the police was to dismiss the take a recess of 15 minutes until the individual had been safely escorted off and then resumed. Just something to consider as we come into election season and as more international calamities potentially spike.
Probably would be something we should discuss.
We had a really good
Another
tour of
meeting.
the, I'm sorry.
No, I think, yeah, we know that tensions are higher than ever, but it would be a good thing to discuss at one of our meetings.
We have had a recess during a meeting, not,
I just wanted to offer some information that in some ways is related to what Council Register just stated, which is that we have heard from a resident at repeated meetings in regard to expenditures the town has made on the Foss Farm water tank and the Beach Hill water tank, alleging that there was some impropriety in the way funds were expended because the university didn't contribute toward those projects. So I would just like to note with some specificity what the facts in fact are. So in 2013, and expended $48,402 out of a capital reserve fund for that project. In 2015, the town expended funds in the Beach Hill water tank. The funds totaled $101,435,000, and that was expended out of our capital reserve fund for that purpose. Now, both expenditures took place under the then in effect water and wastewater system agreement between the town of Durham and the University of New Hampshire. That was approved or entered into or dated the 15th day of November 2005 and went in essence through 2016. And that agreement defined the ownership of different components of the water system. And some of the components listed include, hold on just a moment, the 3 storage tanks providing a total of 4.6 million gallons of storage. Those include the UNH Edgewood Road water tank, 1 million gallons, the town's Foss Farm Road tank, 3 million gallons, and the town's Beach Hill tank, 0.6 million gallons. later in the agreement, the document says, after execution of this agreement, capital improvements that are integral to the overall improvements to town or UNH-owned property or infrastructure shall be funded by the appropriate entity only, as indicated on the water system map included as attachment B. So the water system map is a giant map.
I'm just going to interrupt for a
Yes.
second. We need a quick motion to
I'd like to
extend
make a
the
motion
meeting.
to extend the meeting to
Alright.
10:48 hours.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we don't have anybody on Zoom right now, so let's do
Yeah.
a quick hand raise. All those in favor? Couple of hands. Okay, back to roll
Now
call.
we gotta do it.
Curtis Register,
Sorry.
aye.
Darrell Ford, nay.
Eric Lund, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Sonia Del, aye.
James Bubar, nay.
Heather Grant, aye.
Be quick.
So a copy of said map was included both in the administrator's office for storage and at UNH facilities for storage. The map clearly indicates that the Edgewood tank was property of UNH and the other two tanks were property of the town of Durham. And therefore, as was the express intent when we entered into this agreement, the cost of updating or improvements to those tanks were borne by those specific entities. And the benefit the town reached was that UNH needed to decommission its Edgewood Road tank.
Edgewood Road.
So the town did not spend anything on the decommissioning of that tank. UNH had to bear that full cost. Subsequently, with the current agreement that's now in effect, we're back to a cost sharing. So if there are future, for the tanks, we change the language. So if there are improvements, then we go to the cost sharing then in effect, based upon water consumption. So everything was done as per the agreement.
All right.
Thank you.
No one thought
I
different.
never had a doubt.
And what that individual does not realize, which my recollection is that UNH had brought cash to bear, so the bonding cost was one part, but UNH had cash that I believe that contributed to the project. So there was the 2/3, 1/3 allocation for that ultimately.
Awesome.
All right.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Councilor Grant? Okay, in that case,
Roll call.
Roll call.
It would
Roll
be
call.
faster if Em just dropped
we don't
out.
have to.
I know, she should. Heather Grant, aye.
Sure, James Bubar, aye, aye.
Sonia Del, aye.
Joe Friedman, aye.
Wayne Burton, aye.
Eric Lund, aye.
Remy,
Darrell
aye.
Ford, aye.
Curtis Register, no.
This meeting is adjourned.
I needed that.